Chapter 1236. Mu Lianjue had been in the military when he was young. Although he was getting on in years, he still had some experience in martial arts. He snatched the fruit knife from her hand and kicked it far away, easily subduing her. "Are you crazy? Are you trying to kill yourself and bring me bad luck?" Mu Lianjue roared and pushed her to the side. Mu Wanru's body swayed, and she staggered before falling on her back beside the toilet bowl. She looked up, and her gaze was as sharp as a poisonous arrow as it ruthlessly pierced him. "Who else could it be if not you? It's all your fault, you killed my child. That's my own flesh and blood, and it's all your fault. Give him back to me, give him back to me." Mu Wanru screamed at him at the top of her lungs. She got up from the floor like a madwoman and pounced on him again with bared fangs and brandished claws. He gave her a slap, but she did not seem to feel pain at all. Like a malicious spirit that had crawled out of hell, she pounced on him. "You lunatic!" Mu Lianjue gripped her hand tightly. His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Mu Wanru, don't play the fool here. I won't fall for your tricks. You ruined all my plans, and I haven't settled the score with you yet. Why? Do you think that I won't do anything to you if you play the fool?" He paused for a moment before saying coldly, "Besides, am I the one who killed your child?" "No. You'd better get to the bottom of this. Who is the one who killed your child?" Mu Wanru smiled sinisterly like a vengeful spirit. "Who else could it be if not you? If not you, who else could it be? Have you forgotten?" His face was sullen. "It's Mu Chen. If he didn't shoot you, you wouldn't have been able to save your child. To be precise, it's Mu Chen who killed your child, do you understand?" "Mu Chen, it's him, it's Mu Chen." Mu Wanru stared blankly and muttered like a madwoman, "Mu Chen, it's him who killed my child, it's him." She suddenly grabbed her hair with a ferocious expression and pulled it hard. "It's him. He killed my child. Ha ha ha. I want him to pay with his life. I want him to pay with his life." The medical team rushed over. As soon as the nurse went up to her, Mu Wanru scratched her with her hand. Unexpectedly, she scratched the nurse's face. "Don't come over. Don't touch me. You all want to harm me, don't you?" "Scram!" Mu Wanru shouted. She looked like she had lost her mind, as if she had gone crazy. Everyone looked at each other. They knew that Mu Wanru must have suffered a huge blow from losing her child, which caused her to fall into a deranged state. They had to stabilize the patient's emotions first before proceeding with further treatment. When the nurse brought over a stun baton, everyone pounced on her and held her by the shoulders to control her. Mu Wanru was still struggling, her hands flailing wildly. A doctor walked over and took out the stun baton. She shuddered violently and convulsed all over before collapsing to the ground. Before she fainted, she still gritted her teeth and muttered, "Mu Chen, it's you, it's you, it's you." Mu Wanru was then transferred to the emergency room for rescue. After this farce, Mu Lianjue only felt unlucky. He cursed and ordered, "Watch her carefully." With that, he left. Chapter 1237. At dawn, the sun rose from the east. In the rainforest, the dew was heavy, and the cold moisture invaded his body. Yu felt that his joints were stiff and cold. From time to time, the howls of wild beasts could be heard in the forest. Mu Chen held a dagger in one hand and a torch in the other. He walked in front to explore the path and cut off the vines that obstructed their path. Lisa walked at the back and looked around vigilantly from time to time. Mu Chen muttered, "How much longer until we can leave this place?" "It's not far." Yu felt a little weak. He was so tired that he felt like he was going to collapse at any time. He had not rested well for 2 days and 2 nights. He had overdrawn his strength for a long time and had not eaten or drunk anything for a day and night. He was hungry and cold. His physical condition had hit rock bottom. Mu Chen comforted him, "Soon, we can leave this place soon. Yu suddenly stopped in his tracks. His breathing was a little rapid. Lisa walked forward and carried him on her back without a word. Yu was stubborn. He was reluctant at first, but now that he was exhausted, he did not have any strength left to struggle. He did not struggle too much and simply let her carry him. "Thank you." He lowered his voice and said awkwardly. Lisa said expressionlessly, "You're my master." In other words, it was her responsibility to protect him. It was also her job. Yu pursed his lips. This girl was really stubborn. She was like a cold machine that meticulously followed the program settings and did not know fatigue. Did she not feel tired? The three of them shuttled through the forest. Although Lisa carried Yu on her back, she was physically strong. She was wearing a combat uniform that was filled with lead. She was much heavier than Yu and Xiao Yichen combined. Therefore, she did not feel tired. On the other hand, Xiao Yichen's footsteps gradually slowed down, perhaps because he was injured. At this moment, there was a sudden rustling sound coming from the forest ahead. Mu Yichen was startled and somewhat frightened by the sound. Just as he was about to step forward to investigate, Lisa suddenly stopped him and shushed him, indicating that he should not act rashly. In the silence, in the dark forest, two pairs of yellow and sharp eyes suddenly flashed slightly in the dense bushes. Then, two creatures that looked similar to wolves and dogs slowly walked out from the dense forest. Two pairs of sharp eyes stared at them like tigers eyeing their prey. What is this? Mu Yichen could not help but feel suffocated. Lisa narrowed her eyes. After examining the two creatures in front of her, she suddenly said, "Wolves." "Wolf?" Mu Yichen was secretly frightened. They seemed to have encountered a situation that they did not want to happen. Yu also frowned and sized them up. However, he said, "No, they are something fiercer than wolves." He had read about them in the animal encyclopedia before. They were definitely not wolves. Lisa frowned slightly. When she heard this, she could not help but take a small step back. Yu added in a deep voice behind her. "These are two jackals." Jackals, there was an idiom called jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards. Thus, it was obvious that jackals and wolves were ferocious. Usually, they hunted in pairs, which was very rare among wild beasts. In fact, there were always some people who confused jackals and wolves. In fact, jackals and wolves were not wolves. They were much smaller than wolves. Chapter 1238. They usually hunted in groups and were very alert. Their sense of smell was especially developed, and they were most active in the morning and evening. Jackals and wolves were very ferocious, and they liked to chase. After discovering their prey, they would gather together to hunt. In ancient times, there was a legend that said jackals were the nemesis of tigers. An individual jackal's attack power was slightly lower than a wolf's, but a pack of jackals was more tenacious than a pack of wolves. Different packs of jackals would cooperate to attack tigers and leopards. There were no racial differences, which greatly increased the survival ability of jackals. Two jackals walked out of the bushes side by side. A pair of gloomy eyes stared at the three intruders standing in front of them who had invaded their territory. From time to time, they would bare their teeth and let out eerie and terrifying howls. Lisa and Mu Yichen didn't move. Jackals loved to chase their prey. They especially liked to gather their companions to surround their prey and then eat them. When she was on a mission in the past, Lisa had also been surrounded by jackals. But at that time, she was different. She was fully armed. Even if she was in a pack of jackals, she could easily kill her way out with a rocket launcher. But now, it was different. She had already run out of ammunition. Wait. Lisa suddenly remembered that there were still 2 bullets in the pistol. She looked at the 2 jackals in front of her vigilantly. Her hand slowly reached to her waist, grabbed the pistol, and pulled it out. Retreat. She lowered her voice and ordered. Mu Yichen glanced at her. He carefully looked at the two jackals that were full of aggression and slowly retreated. Wu, the wolf let out a warning whimper and suddenly raised its neck. The wolf's howl echoed in the empty mountain forest, as if it was summoning the pack and calling for companions. Lisa suddenly pulled out her gun and shot. The bullet hit the head of one of the jackals. Blood splattered. It was a headshot in an instant. It was terrifyingly accurate. Without waiting for the other jackal to react, Lisa suddenly reloaded and shot at the other jackal's head. Bang! However, jackals were famous for their agility. The moment the bullet left the chamber, it reacted quickly. Poof! The bullet missed by a few millimeters and hit its chest. It howled and fell to the ground. Its limbs twitched violently as it kept struggling. Mu Yichen immediately went forward and almost didn't give it any chance to struggle. He grabbed its head with one hand and broke its head. The jackal let out a whimper and quickly stopped breathing. It was dead. Yu Yu's heart calmed down, but he felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness. He still remembered the introduction to jackals in the encyclopedia. Jackals and wolves were social animals. Most of them were strong and cunning leaders, who led one or several families together temporarily. This meant that there were more than 2 jackals and wolves in this area. Next, his guess was quickly confirmed. Mu Yichen stood up and suddenly heard a rustling sound not far away. He turned his head abruptly and looked over, only to see several pairs of yellow eyes flickering in and out of the bushes. It was a pack of jackals. Oh no! Yu Yu had a bad feeling and his heart trembled. Mu Yichen slowly retreated and stayed close to Lisa. He frowned vigilantly. According to his estimation, there were about a dozen jackals surrounding them. Chapter 1239. In the darkness, the fire from the torches dazzled their eyes. The strong light created a huge visual barrier for them and scared the wolves back a little. Taking advantage of their short and sluggish reaction, Mu Yichen growled, "Run!" Lisa carried Yu Yu on her back and turned to run with Mu Yichen. The wolves caught up with them very quickly. Lisa carried Yu Yu on her back but still ran very fast. In her fear, all her potential was stimulated and her movements were as swift as an agile leopard. Mu Yichen didn't show any signs of weakness and ran very fast. In his panic, he accidentally tripped on the broken branches on the ground and fell to his knees. Lisa heard the commotion and turned her head around. She saw a jackal pouncing towards Mu Yichen with its fangs bared and claws brandished. She took a step forward and swung her fist at its head. Awo! The jackal was sent flying by the punch and rolled a few times on the ground. It stood up abruptly with a flash of fear in its eyes. Following that, it glared at Lisa and panted. Its greedy saliva dripped down its sharp fangs. It knew how dangerous Lisa was and didn't dare to act rashly. It panted heavily and tried to take a step forward from time to time, sharpening its knife. Mu Yichen was shocked and stood up abruptly. He saw that Lisa's knuckles were dripping with blood. Just now, in a moment of desperation, she didn't think much and swung her fist over. She hit the jackal's head, but her fist met its teeth. Her skin and flesh immediately split open. "Are you okay?" Mu Yichen looked guilty. Lisa didn't say anything and held Yu Yu with one hand and Mu Yichen's hand with the other. She turned around and ran. Behind him, the jackals and wolves continued to eye him covetously. As Mu Yichen ran, he swept the torch in his hand at them in an attempt to intimidate them. However, he was wrong about one thing. Wild beasts were afraid of fire, but the fire they were afraid of was the kind that spread over a large area and spread quickly. The torches in people's hands did not have much of an effect on them. If the animals are determined to attack you, the torch itself is useless. Sometimes the animals feel threatened and take measures to fight back. For example, if you hold a torch at night, you are more likely to be attacked by poisonous snakes in the grass. Therefore, the jackals were not afraid of the torch in his hand. Or perhaps, they were really hungry and had a strong desire to attack. Yu Yu lowered his head and looked at Lisa's hand. It was covered in blood. He could not help but frown. Lisa ran as fast as she could, but no matter how fast she couldn't match the speed of the jackals. A jackal pounced on her and pushed her to the ground. Yu Yu was thrown to the side. Mu Yichen hurriedly reached out and grabbed his hand. However, in the next second, Yu Yu felt the ground under his feet sink in. It was a trap. He shouted in his heart, but it was too late. His whole body fell down. Mu Yichen held his arm tightly, but he couldn't withstand the weight of his falling body. The two of them rolled down the hole together. Lisa was shocked when she saw this. The jackal that pounced on her pressed down on her shoulders with its paws. Its stinky breath assaulted her nostrils and its saliva dripped onto her face. Its pair of eyes stared at her fiercely. Chapter 1240. She gripped its neck tightly, grabbed its upper and lower jaws, and twisted it with all her might. The jackal howled in pain and struggled to get away from her. Lisa stood up while panting heavily. She pulled out a machete from her waist belt and glanced warily at the pack of wolves that surrounded her. A jackal that was standing at the head of the pack suddenly pounced on her. She held the machete in her hand and swung it fiercely, piercing through its throat. Perhaps this scene was enough to intimidate the pack of wolves behind her. They were frightened by her violent actions and retreated a few steps. Their bloodshot eyes were filled with fear. Lisa walked over and choked the throat of the wolf that she had just pierced through. She raised the Malaysian saber in her hand high up and beheaded it with a single stroke. Then, she kicked its head into the pack of wolves. The pack of wolves let out sorrowful and frightened howls. This jackal was their leader. Now that the pack of wolves had lost their leader, they naturally lost their will to fight. In the blink of an eye, they scattered like birds. Lisa walked to the entrance of the cave, picked up the flashlight, and shone it into the cave. It was dark and cold in the cave. Yu Yu raised his head in a sorry state. He propped himself up with both arms and groped around. Then, he heard a creaking sound and felt a sharp pain in his arm. His face instantly contorted in pain. He groaned a few times and struggled to pull his arm out. It was caught by a trap. The sharp teeth had bitten into his flesh. Fortunately, the trap was not big, so the wound was not very serious. Yu Yu took a few deep breaths. His other hand groped around in the darkness and finally touched a cold arm. He quickly pushed aside the pile of withered grass and struggled to help Mu Yichen up. When Yu Yu fell into the cave earlier, his feet stepped on the pit, so his body landed first. The ground of the cave was covered with a thick layer of grass. Therefore, other than a few bruises on his body, he was fine. The moment Mu Yichen fell into the cave, he instinctively grabbed Yu Yu's arm. His head was facing down, and the moment he fell, his head hit the rock wall. Therefore, his consciousness was a little muddled. The flashlight shone down. Yu Yu raised his head and saw Lisa asking, "How are you?" "I'm fine." He turned his head and gently patted Mu Yichen's cheek. Bro. How are you?" Mu Yichen slowly opened his eyes and hissed in pain. He rubbed the spot where he had been hit earlier and felt a sticky trace of blood. His head was broken and blood was seeping out. Amid the pain, Mu Yichen sobered up a little. Yu Yu said angrily, You. Don't you know that this is dangerous?" "Yes." "Idiot. Can't you?" Yu Yu was exasperated. Mu Yichen was stunned, but he quickly understood the meaning of his words. Yu Yu was angry. When he fell into the trap, Mu Yichen clearly had the chance to let go, but he grabbed his arm tightly and did not let go. Was he an idiot? Did he not know that he was in more danger than him? Mu Yichen did not think so much. It was almost an instinctive reaction. He only thought that no matter what happened, he had to protect his younger brother until the last moment. He could not leave him behind. Lisa looked down and asked, "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Yes, I'm a little hurt." Chapter 1241. Mu Yichen immediately took out the dagger tied to his thigh and poked it between his teeth. After much effort, Yu Yu's arm was finally free. Lisa threw a bottle of medicine for emergencies. Mu Yichen immediately grabbed Yu Yu's arm and applied the medicine to his wound. Yu Yu couldn't stand the pain and couldn't help but groan a few times. His shoulders heaved up and down uncontrollably, and his scalp was numb. "It hurts a little. Bear with it." Mu Yichen didn't stop what he was doing. After the bleeding stopped completely, he pulled up the hem of his clothes, tilted his head, and used his mouth to pick up a corner. He tore off a piece of cloth and skillfully bandaged the wound. Yu Yu bit the end of the cloth and tied a dead knot. Immediately, he collapsed next to Ling Moli, panting heavily. Lisa stood at the entrance of the cave and observed for a while. It was a very new trap. It was probably set up not long ago. The hole wasn't deep, but it was about 5 or 6 meters deep. It would be difficult to climb out with bare hands. Lisa said, "Wait for me." With that, she turned and left. Yu Yu leaned against the rock wall. His wound wasn't serious, but it was very cold in the cave. His blood coagulated, and his wound seemed to be frozen. It was excruciatingly painful. Yu Yu's physical strength was almost exhausted. He sat in a daze and didn't have any strength left. Mu Yichen looked around. It was probably a trap used to catch animals. He sat down next to Yu Yu and pulled up his sleeve, but it was already sticky with blood. When he fell on the ground, there was probably a broken arrow at the spot where he fell. At this moment, one end of the broken arrow was inserted into his arm. Along the way, he tried his best to endure the pain. It wasn't until he pulled up his sleeve that he realized that the wound was already bleeding profusely. He absent-mindedly recalled the soul-stirring scene just now, and his emotions were unable to calm down for a long time. If Lisa had not turned around and saved him, the wolf would have bitten his throat in the next second. Yu Yu was shocked when she saw the wound on his arm. "What happened?" "It's nothing. It's just a small injury." He sat up with difficulty, held the dagger in his hand, and used the dagger to cut a hole in his clothes. He carefully tore his clothes and pulled them down to his shoulders. He examined the wound and looked at the half of the arrowhead that was still stuck in the wound. He bit his lip and used the knife to draw a cross on the wound. He grabbed the arrowhead and pulled it out forcefully. Blood spurted out. Mu Yichen wiped off the blood on his face. Looking at the heart of the arrow, he couldn't help but frown deeply. He was worried that the arrowheads were poisoned. This forest was probably frequented by hunters. Many hunters would smear poison on their arrowheads to numb the nerves of wild animals. After hesitating for a moment, he gritted his teeth and kissed the wound. After a while, he turned his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. He frowned and persistently kissed the wound again. Then, he tore off the cloth on his body and quickly wrapped the wound firmly. When he raised his head, he suddenly met Yu Yu's shocked eyes. "What's wrong?" Yu Yu was stunned for a long time. It was not because of anything else, but because Mu Yichen's skills were skillful and swift. Could it be that he often got injured like this? "Stupid brother, do you often get injured?" Mu Yichen was stunned for a moment before he slowly nodded. "Okay. Why?" Chapter 1242. In the past, when I was in the special training camp, I often got injured when I was out in the wild. Yu Yu felt as if his heart had been stabbed. His heart ached for him. "Alright, don't let your imagination run wild. I'm used to it." Mu Yichen chuckled and reached out to rub his hair. Yu Yu grabbed his hand unhappily. "Promise me." "You're not allowed to get injured again." Yu Yu stared into his eyes and said word by word. Mu Yichen was stunned. He was a little surprised. Suddenly, he saw undisguised love in Yu Yu's eyes. His heart warmed. "All right. I promise you." "Okay." Yu Yu leaned back and sat against the jagged stone wall. His back was rubbed against the uneven stone wall. He adjusted the angle of his back and felt better. He was a little tired. He took the opportunity to rest and recuperate. When he closed his eyes, he suddenly heard the sound of someone getting up. He opened his eyes in surprise, only to see a large coat covering her head, blocking all of his vision. Yu Yu waved his hand in an attempt to pull it away, but a strong hand held him back. "It's cold here." "Don't catch a cold," Mu Yichen said. "Aren't you cold?" "I'm not cold." Mu Yichen sneered. "This is nothing." "Really?" Yu Yu was a little doubtful. Mu Yichen pursed his lips. "I'm really not cold. In the winter, I can swim a few times in the lake." But in reality? He was cold too. The cold in the cave was wet and cold. It was so cold that his scalp was numb. When he frowned, he felt that his scalp was almost frozen. After a while, Lisa found some vines and hung them down the stone wall. "Climb up!" she shouted from above. Mu Yichen stood up. The other end of the rattan was tied tightly to the tree by Lisa. "You go first," Mu Yichen said to Yu Yu. Yu Yu shook her head tiredly. "Go up first, then pull me up." "Okay, wait for me." Mu Yichen grabbed onto the vines with both hands and kicked off the stone wall with the tips of his feet. In no time at all, he climbed up. Turning around, he shouted into the cave, "Yu Yu, hurry up and come up." However, he seemed to have forgotten that Yu Yu's hand was injured. Even if Yu Yu was not injured, he would not be able to climb up with his pathetic arm strength. Yu Yu tried for a while, enduring the pain of being cut by the vines, and fell down several times. "I think I don't have any strength left." Yu Yu's weak voice was heard. "You guys should meet up with the troops first, then think of a way to save me." Lisa frowned. Before she could say anything, Mu Yichen said anxiously, "No. I can't leave you here alone. It's safe here. I'll wait for you guys here." After a pause, Yu Yu said helplessly, "I really don't have any strength left. I'm so tired. This place is too far from the entrance. I can't climb up at all. I'll go down and carry you." "Are you crazy?" If he carried him, he would have to bear double the weight. If it was before, he believed that Mu Yichen could do it. However, Mu Yichen was on the verge of exhaustion now. There was no way he could do it. "Brother, don't worry. It's safe here. I'll wait here for you guys to save me." Yu Yu's voice was heard again. Mu Yichen still could not bear to see him leave. Chapter 1243. Yu Yu continued, "Based on my estimation, this place is not far from the rendezvous point. An hour's round trip should be enough. Don't worry, brother, I can hold on. Don't worry about me." "Okay. You must wait for me." Yu Yu smiled and ordered, "Lisa, protect my brother." "Yes, master." Lisa replied respectfully. She also felt that if they continued to drag on, the three of them would be exhausted and none of them would be able to walk out of here. While the two of them still had energy, they should quickly rendezvous with the troops. It was relatively safer for Yu Yu to stay here. Lisa said, "Stay here and wait for me." Yu Yu nodded. Lisa turned around and continued on their way. Mu Yichen was conflicted. However, it was indeed relatively safer for Yu Yu to stay here. His stamina was too weak. Mu Yichen also knew that Lisa and he were on the verge of exhaustion. If they met with any accidents along the way, they would not be able to attend to them. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and looked at Yu Yu deeply before he turned around and followed them. Yu Yu closed his eyes and rested. At this moment, he was extremely exhausted. He knew his body's condition very well. It would be extremely difficult for him to stay here and wait for them, let alone follow them on their journey. However, no matter how slim the hope was, as long as he had a little bit of energy left, he would persevere until the very last moment. Yu Yu wrapped himself in the jacket that Mu Yichen had left for him. The cave was cold and damp, and it was almost overwhelming. He felt that all the blood in his body seemed to have solidified, so much so that it was difficult for it to flow. Every blood capillary on his cheeks was frozen, and even the slightest change in expression made his face feel numb. He touched his face and thought that there was a layer of ice on his face. Yu Yu tried her best to keep her eyes open. She was tired and sleepy. When she was freezing, she couldn't help but curl up into a ball like a fragile shrimp in a corner. However, she couldn't resist the cold. Gradually, his eyelids became heavier and heavier. He tried his best to keep his eyes wide open, knowing that his physical strength had reached its limit. However, he could not allow himself to close his eyes. The temperature in the forest was almost 0 degrees Celsius, especially at dawn, when the chill was heavy. He raised his head and looked at the sun rising from the east, but he did not feel the slightest bit of light or heat. He sighed inwardly and felt that he couldn't go on like this. At the very least, he had to stand up and move his body. Otherwise, he would be frozen stiff and feel dizzy. It was as if he would fall unconscious in the next second. In such an environment, if he closed his eyes, he didn't know if he could wake up. Yu Yu stood up and hugged his jacket tighter. He stomped his feet on the spot and walked around the cave. The strong wind blew into the cave entrance. Due to the special structure of the trap, the wind in the cave was especially strong. It blew in like ice water pouring over one's head. Yu Yu gave up. After careful consideration, he decided to find a place where he could shelter himself from the wind for the time being. He found a corner and sat down. He raised his head and looked at the sky in a daze. At this moment, the sky was already slightly bright. Where were Xiao Yichen and Lisa now? Chapter 1244. His back was leaning against the rock wall, which was craggy and jagged. When he fell, his back had hit the sharpest part of the rock. He reckoned that it was because he had lost some weight. His back was stained with dew, and it was painful and itchy. It was as if countless ants were gnawing on his wound. He had not eaten or drunk anything for a day and a night. His throat was almost smoking from coughing. All the bad things had come together to form a hopeless situation. Yu Yu buried his face in his arms, full of hope. When he opened his eyes and looked up again, Xiao Yichen had already reached out to him from inside the cave. After passing through a large forest, there was a road that was several kilometers long. Xiao Yichen and Lisa ran and stopped on the road one after another. They tried their best to establish contact with the troops in the shortest time possible. At this time, the sun was slowly rising from the horizon. Although it was early in the morning, the temperature could not reach them, but it still drove away some of the coldness and brought about a rare warmth. Xiao Yichen's footsteps became heavier and heavier. He was in a state of overload and could collapse at any moment. His condition was worse than Yun Tianyou's. He was covered in injuries. Some of them were not treated in time and were already inflamed, causing excruciating pain. Even so, he didn't slow down at all. That was because Yu Yu was still waiting for him. A minute later meant a minute more danger. Lisa looked at his stiff and forbearing expression and knew that he was enduring the pain on his body. "I'll carry you," she said. Mu Yichen looked at her in surprise, but he quickly hid the surprise in his eyes and coldly said, "No." She had always respected the strong. In her eyes, Mu Yichen's willpower was shockingly strong, so her impression of him changed somewhat. Mu Yichen's throat was extremely dry. Suddenly, his legs gave way and he fell to the ground. Lisa immediately walked over and reached out to help him. Mu Yichen did not reach out his hand, though. His shoulders were heaving violently, and his breathing was rapid. Despite his efforts to restrain himself, his whole body was strangely stiff. Mu Yichen gritted his teeth and slowly stretched his body. He took a deep breath of cold air and tried to push himself up from the ground with his hand on the wall. However, when he half knelt on one knee and propped his upper body up, his vision turned black. He felt dizzy and his back was instantly covered in cold sweat. Lisa reached out to touch his forehead and was shocked to find that he had a fever. Beads of cold sweat the size of beans on his forehead and flowed down. Mu Yichen opened his eyes. His face was ghastly pale without a trace of blood. Lisa knelt on one knee on the ground and gently wiped away the cold sweat on his face. She had already guessed that the wounds on his body must have been infected. Coupled with the exhaustion of his physical strength throughout the night, this led to the fever. However, she didn't have any more medicine on her. Is it serious? She knitted her brows and asked with concern. Yu had already told her to protect him, so at this moment, it was her duty to protect him. Mu Yichen bit his lips and shook his head. It's fine. As he spoke, another bean-sized bead of cold sweat rolled down his face. No matter how strong he was, his body could not deceive her eyes. Chapter 1245. When he opened his eyes again, Mu Yichen felt that the dizziness had subsided a little. He thought that his physical strength had reached its limit. He became more anxious. There was a deep sense of helplessness. How good would it be if he was a Superman? However, he was not. At that moment, he was extremely frustrated with himself for being powerless. He could not even protect his younger brother. He was so angry at himself that he could not help but punch the ground. His knuckles were bleeding. What are you doing? Lisa held his fist tightly. This idiot. Did he think that his injuries were not serious enough? Mu Yichen reached out to wipe the cold sweat off his face. He struggled to stand up. His body swayed, and his vision turned black again. His body fell forward heavily. Lisa immediately went forward and supported his center of gravity. As soon as she touched his skin, she felt a chill that seeped into her heart. The temperature of his skin was frighteningly cold. It was as if it could penetrate her clothes and freeze her blood. His clothes were all wet. Some of it was blood, while others were wet from the dew as they passed through the forest. Along the way, he had been trying to be brave. He endured his exhaustion and forced himself to walk so far. At that moment, he no longer had any energy left. Despite his physical condition, he still insisted on carrying Yu. His willpower was extraordinarily tenacious. Lisa carried him on her back. Mu Yichen was half a head taller than Yu. Hence, he was heavier than Yu. Lisa did not have much energy left. If it was in her usual state, Mu Yichen's weight was nothing. However, at that moment, her body swayed and she almost collapsed. Mu Yichen's head rested weakly on her shoulder. His rapid breathing blew into her ears. She could still feel his strong and rapid heartbeat. Thump, 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 it was scorching hot. She supported him with all her strength and stepped on the road again. On the mountain road, the wind was biting cold. She was drenched in sweat, and when the wind blew, she felt both wet and cold. Mu Yichen's mind was in a mess. When he opened his eyes in a daze, he felt that he was being carried on someone's back. He looked down and saw Lisa's determined face. The cold wind brushed past her hair. Her messy hair intertwined with her thick and long eyelashes. Observing the side of her face from a close distance, he discovered that this girl had a face that could make people think she was a celestial being. She had a special temperament. She clearly looked so cold and arrogant, as if there was not a trace of smoke or fire on her body. The blood flowing in her body had long condensed into snow, and her bones had been cast into ice. However, one could not help but feel sorry for her. She clearly looked very unapproachable, distant, cold, and unapproachable. However, he couldn't help but feel a sense of closeness. After a long night of trekking, Lisa gradually felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. She was not really a war machine. She was made of flesh and blood. Even living people had their limits. Hence, she could not help but slow down. Mu Yichen said weakly, Put me down. I can walk on my own, shut up. Be quiet. Lisa spat out a few words with difficulty. She was already distraught. Her legs were as heavy as lead. It was so heavy that she found it difficult to lift a step. Chapter 1246. His head felt heavy and muddled, and the scene in front of him started to drift away. Finally, she could not bear the burden anymore. Her world suddenly turned dark. Just as she was about to collapse, she vaguely saw a troop rushing toward her from the edge of her blurry vision. Lisa squinted her eyes slightly and shook her head hard, trying to get rid of the confusion in her head. Only then did she get a clearer view. Leading the way was Vermilion Bird, who was fully armed. Walking beside her was Njie. As if a stream of energy had been injected into her body, she pulled herself together and walked toward Vermilion Bird with Mu Yichen on her back. Vermilion Bird saw a girl carrying a child toward her at the end of the mountain road. Squinting her eyes and recognizing that the child was Lisa, she raised her hand. It's Lisa. Luca, send someone to get her. Yes. Luca immediately led his team and rushed over. Lisa tried her best to hold on until the last moment when Luca reached her. When his teammate picked up Xiao Yichen, her body swayed and she collapsed to the ground. Lisa? Luca squatted down in shock and carried Lisa. She opened her mouth and her eyelids fluttered a few times. Before she could say a word, she fainted. She had been holding on for so long. She was beyond her limit. Luca anxiously called out a few times. Lisa was already unconscious. When Vermilion Bird arrived, she only saw two people. Where's Yuntianyu? Luca shook his head in silence. There were only 2 children and 1 child missing. She frowned and put on her headset. Command Center, this is Vermilion Bird. Please send Yuntianyo's location. Yes. The temporary command center immediately sent the location information to her laptop. In fact, she had originally planned to meet at the bridge, but when the person did not show up, she requested the command center to send Yuntianyo's location. In the end, the reply she got was that the location signal was sometimes strong and sometimes weak. There was no signal coverage in the forest, so the location was not accurate. After Zhu Ke lost contact with Lisa, she sent people into the forest to search for her. Yuntianyo's signal frequency, however, was abnormal. By the time he arrived, his signal was already several miles away. This meant that he was heading north. Therefore, the Vermilion Bird sent people to the rendezvous point, not leaving even an inch. In the end, this was the result that he had been waiting for. When Vermilion Bird's troops arrived at the last location, they found a trap that was more than 5 meters deep. When she turned on the flashlight and shone it inside, there was no one. She only found a blood-stained coat. The centaur fished out the coat. Vermilion Bird looked at it, her face slightly sullen. What's going on? Gong Jie's voice came from the headset. Where is Yuntianyu? Vermilion Bird buckled her headset and replied, he's gone. Please send the location again. The location signal has been cut off. Interrupted. Vermilion Bird was slightly surprised. How is that possible? Luca said in a low voice, the chip implanted in his body is made of material that can be absorbed by the human body. If the time limit is exceeded, the chip will be absorbed by the human body. Vermilion Bird frowned and clenched her fists tightly. She turned around and coldly ordered, send more people to search for him. He's not far from here. Do a carpet search. Yes. Chapter 1247. In the hospital, Mu Yaja received a call from Li Hanlin. According to his report, Mu Yichen had returned safely. Yuntianyo's whereabouts were unknown, so they had sent more people to search for him. Mu Yaja was shocked. What happened? Because we have lost contact with the two children, we don't know what exactly happened. We'll know the details when the little master wakes up. Chairman Mu, I'm sorry. Mu Yaja hung up the phone and turned to meet Yun Shishir's expectant and inquiring gaze. Are the children back? Yes. Mu Yaja nodded and furrowed his brows. He decided to hide this matter from her for the time being. They're back safely, don't worry. They're back? Where are they? Yun Shishir's face finally regained its color. Her eyes lit up as she excitedly tried to get off the bed. Mu Yaja stopped her. I'll bring you there when you're feeling better. No. Yun Shishir's face froze for a moment before she asked suspiciously, Mu Yaja, are you lying to me just to comfort me? Actually, the children aren't back safely, right? She was a little suspicious and stared at him suspiciously. Mu Yaja said, be good. I'm not lying to you. The two children were injured and were sent to the hospital. If you want to see them, look at how haggard you are now. My heart will ache if they see you like this. Yun Shishir was startled. She lowered her head to take a look. Indeed, she looked a little haggard now. Have some porridge first and rest for a while. I'll bring you there when you look better, okay? Mu Yaja gently coaxed her. Yun Shishir looked at him suspiciously for a while. She did not see any trace of deceit on his face before she returned to bed unhappily. I don't feel at ease until I see the children. Have some porridge first, okay? Mu Yaja picked up the bowl of porridge at the side and looked at her tenderly. Ever since he rushed back to the country, he had been accompanying her for 2 days and 2 nights without sleep. As a result, there was some stubble on his chin. His originally handsome face had become thinner and more chiseled. Yun Shishir looked at him deeply and suddenly felt a stabbing pain in her heart. She suddenly felt that she was a little too willful. She could not sleep well due to worry. He, too, could not close his eyes. She was a mother, and he was also a father. How could he not be worried? She was worried and scared, but she could rely on him. As for him? But she had no one to talk to. He must be more tired. Tears welled up in her eyes all of a sudden. Mu Yaja opened the thermos flask and picked up the porridge. When he turned to look at her, he saw her guilty expression and frowned slightly. What's wrong? Mu Yaja. I've made you worry. Yun Shishir muttered weakly. She looked up and stared at him. From now on, I'll listen to you and not let my thoughts run wild. Mu Yaja was slightly stunned. He could not help but reach out his finger and gently scratch her nose. Silly. He picked up the spoon and said gently, I'll feed you, okay? Okay. Yun Shishir nodded. The porridge was sent over by the servant earlier. It was in the thermos flask and was still a little hot. Chapter 1248. Yun Shishir took a small bite and swallowed it. Instantly, she felt warm all over her body. Her body did not feel so cold anymore. Mu Yaja repeated the action until he fed her half a bowl of porridge. Yun Shishir said, I'm full. I can't drink any more. Drink a little more, he coaxed patiently. She could not bear with him and drank a few more mouthfuls. She had a small appetite. After she was full, she lay down gently. Mu Yaja stood up and walked to the bathroom. After washing up, he walked to the bed. I'm going to the office to settle something. Have a good rest and wait for me to come back. You're going to the office? Yun Shishir was a little dissatisfied. Is there something important? Yes, it's very important. There were some debts that he had to settle with that person. Yun Shishir asked, when are you coming back? I'll come back when I'm done. Yun Shishir pouted. That was as good as not saying anything. However, she did not say anything. She lay down on the bed obediently and smiled. I'll wait for you. Okay. Mu Yaja folded the bedding for her and turned to leave. A wave of darkness that could topple mountains and overturn seas swept towards him. Immediately after, he fainted. In his groggy state, he felt an inexplicable heat. It was so hot that his whole body was burning. His chest felt as though it was being burned by something, and it was swollen and painful. Yu Yu woke up from his muddled state. He was a little confused about where he was. The headache was getting clearer. The pain was clear and intense. Somehow, his weak consciousness told him that he was still alive. After a long period of darkness, when he opened his eyes again, it was because he felt a tender little hand running amok on his face. When he woke up, he opened his eyelids and saw a small, wheat-colored hand gently stroking his eyelashes. Wow! Ah Pa, this little brother's eyelashes are so beautiful. They're so long, just like a beautiful fan. A tender and soft voice sounded. Yu Yu frowned slightly. She tried to open her eyelids, but her vision was still blurry. Lingling, little brother is injured. Move aside and don't disturb his rest. But father, Lingling didn't disturb little brother's rest. Father, why is little brother's skin so white? He looks like a child from the city. Also, little brother is very handsome, even more handsome than that Huzi in the village. Yu Yu's heart tightened, and his eyes widened in an instant. He turned his head abruptly and met the eyes of a little girl, who was looking at him with surprise. The girl was startled at first, then she leaned over and cupped his face to take a look. Yu Yu's eyes widened in shock. Seeing that he had woken up, a look of joy appeared on the little girl's face. Father, little brother is awake, little brother is awake. The little girl waved her hands happily and ran away. Yu Yu suddenly sat up on the bed. However, his movement was too big, and it affected the wound on his arm. He sucked in a breath of cold air and gently covered his arm with his trembling hand. He turned his head and looked around. What entered his eyes was a slightly backward civilian hut. Chapter 1249. The floor was paved with green stone slabs. He was lying on a four-poster wooden bed. Where was this place? He remembered that he had fallen into a trap. After he fainted, he didn't know what had happened. When he woke up, why was he in a villager's house? Yu Yu lowered his head and looked at himself. He had changed into a new set of clothes. He didn't know where the clothes came from, but they looked a little rustic. They had been washed too many times and were a size too big. His wounds had been cleaned in time, replaced with gauze, and bandaged properly. Not long after, along with the sound of hurried footsteps, an adult man led the noisy little girl to the bedside. Seeing that she had finally woken up, his face was filled with relief, but at the same time, a trace of guilt appeared. Little boy, you're awake. It's good that you're awake. It's good that you're awake. Yu Yu was instantly on guard as he sized up the man in front of him. The man was slightly older. He had dark skin and a sturdy physique. He was wearing the same clothes that had been washed too many times, and his beard was unshaven. It was obvious that he didn't take care of himself and looked a little sloppy. However, his face was calm and honest, and his entire body emitted a simple and unadorned aura. As soon as he opened his mouth, his voice was thick and hoarse. It seemed that he must be a veteran smoker. He sat by the bedside. Yu Yu sensed the deep kindness in his eyes and let down his guard. It was probably this man who had rescued him from the trap. It was also this man who had helped him bandage his wounds and change his clothes. It seemed that this man didn't have any ill intentions. Hence, he didn't have to be wary of him. Who are you? Yu Yu smiled and asked. The man smiled, then hugged the little girl, and told him the story. When I went to retrieve the trap today, I found that you had fallen into it, so I rescued you. I saw that you were injured, so I brought you back first. I saw that you were covered in blood and were seriously injured. The man's calm and hoarse voice had a strong local accent. From his long-winded narration, Tianyu learned that there was a remote farm near this mountain path. The man before him was a farmer living there. He usually farmed a dozen or so mu of land and occasionally went hunting in the mountains. And the trap that he fell into was set up by him. He originally hoped to catch some wild wolves and deer, but he didn't expect that he would step on it and fall down. It was no wonder that when he woke up, this man walked over and showed such an ashamed expression to him. It was said that the farm here was called Anyang Village, a typical village in the city. Speaking of which, the villagers of Anyang Village could be considered as old natives of the capital. Because the place was remote, surrounded by mountains and rivers, far from the city center, the city government did not develop it. The main reason was that there wasn't much value in developing such a location. There were a few hundred villagers in Anyang Village. Most of them used to farm for a living. Although they weren't rich, they lived a peaceful life. A few years ago, a farmer had the whimsical idea of opening up a forest and planting fruit trees. Unexpectedly, the harvest that year was good, so the villagers of Anyang Village started planting fruit trees one after another. When this man brought him back, it was said that it caused a stir in the village. Chapter 1250. Secondly, when the man brought him back, he was covered in blood, which attracted the attention of many villagers. Some of them felt sorry for him, so they sent him some old clothes. "Little boy, why did you go to that forest? It's dangerous there are a lot of wild animals there. Where are you from? How did you end up here?" The man fired a barrage of questions at him like a machine gun. He looked young, but he did not look like a country bumpkin. His clothes were expensive, and his skin was fair and tender. He was a typical child who grew up in the city. His daughter was envious. Girls love to look good, but growing up in the countryside, his skin was tanned and rough. Seeing Yu's handsome face and fair skin, she was envious. While he was unconscious, she tirelessly leaned on the bed and sized him up. She would pick up his hand and look at it, and then she would fiddle with his eyelashes. She would never get tired of playing with them. The little girl yearned for life in the city. There were always idol dramas on TV. Her dream was to get into a city university when she grew up and live in the city. The little girl fell in love with Tianyu at first sight. Although she was still young and had not reached the age of first awakening of love, she actually knew how to be shy when she looked at Yu. Yu felt that this family was quite warm-hearted and friendly to him. They were simple and honest, and did not seem to harbor any ill intentions toward him. Moreover, his wounds were cleaned, so he still had a good impression of the man in front of him. However, when the man asked about his identity, he did not say much and only said that he lived in the city. The man asked for his parents' numbers so that he could call them and send him home. Yu gave him Li Hanlan's number. The man then left the little girl at home to look after him while he went to the village to make a call. This village was very remote, so the communication system was very outdated. Not every family had such an advanced and luxurious thing like a mobile phone, nor did they have a landline. Many people would go to a small store in the village to make a call. There was a public phone there, and it was called E-Department's PHS. 1 yuan could make a call for a few minutes. It was quite worth it. When the villagers of Anyang Village needed to make a call, they would go to the convenience store to make the call. Anyang Village was very far away from the nearby villages and towns. Fortunately, living in this village, they did not have to worry about food and clothing. Therefore, the villagers here rarely left the village. The little girl's name was Lingling, and her full name was Zhao Linghua. She was 6 years old this year and was attending a private primary school in the village. That was what Lingling had told him. Seeing that Yu had woken up, Lingling immediately started chattering non-stop. Yu didn't have the energy to respond to her. He just leaned on the bed quietly and waited for the man to finish the call. After contacting Li Hanlan, he waited for Li Hanlan to come and pick him up. Yu's indifference did not dampen the little girl's enthusiasm. She talked to herself and did not feel lonely. Instead, she was very happy. This was understandable. Lingling had grown up in this village, and it was rare for her to see a child from the city. Naturally, she was filled with curiosity. Little brother, is the moon in the city big and round? Chapter 1251. I saw on TV that there are many tall buildings in the city. They're very, very tall. They're so tall. Won't the wind blow them down? Where's your house, big brother? Do you have immortal taro pancakes at home? My mother knows how to make immortal taro pancakes. They're delicious. They're made with taro. They're sweet and crunchy. She became more and more excited as she spoke. She jumped off the bed and ran out of the door. No one knew what she was going to do. Not long after, she skipped into the room with a plate in her hands. There were a few golden taro pancakes on the plate. She handed the plate to him, raised her thick eyebrows slightly, and said with a smile, "These are my mother's immortal taro pancakes. They're very delicious. They're freshly made. Do you want to try them?" As she spoke, she took a piece and put it in her mouth. She took a big bite and began to chew. It was crunchy. Looking at her eating, it tasted exceptionally good. Yu hesitated for a moment, but he was simply too hungry. He had not eaten or drunk anything for 2 days, so his stomach was rumbling with hunger. Hence, he could not care less as he picked up a piece and bit into it. Hiss, it was so sweet. It was so sweet that it stuck to his teeth. Yu bit off a piece and chewed. Lingling was elated when she saw that he had eaten it. She asked proudly, "Is it good? Is it good?" "Yes." Yu nodded politely. Although it was not his favorite flavor, he felt that it was quite tasty now that he was hungry. Lingling sat by his bed and ate a piece of taro pancake each. She chattered incessantly as she nibbled on the immortal taro pancake. Yu would respond politely from time to time. "Do you watch TV?" "We have a TV at home. My father bought it in town last year." Lingling got off the bed and turned on the TV. Yu's lips twitched when he saw it. She must have bought this second-hand TV, right? It was black and white and only about 10 inches long. When she turned it on, snowflakes fluttered in the air. This type of TV had been phased out more than 10 years ago. However, in Anyang village, it was already considered very fashionable to have such a television. There were only a few channels on the TV. At this moment, there was only the afternoon news, but Lingling was also watching it with relish. For her, as long as there were people moving in the screen, she would find it very interesting. Not long after, the man hurried back, but he brought some bad news. As it turned out, when he rushed over, the store was actually closed. After asking around, it turned out that the store owner had gone to town to stock up on goods. Now, it was a distance of 30 miles to town. Adding on the fact that he had to stock up on goods, he would probably only be back tomorrow. Therefore, the man said that he would settle him down for the night first. When the boss of the snack bar came back tomorrow, he would call his family. Although Yu was worried, there was nothing she could do. "Then I'll have to trouble you." Yu thanked him politely. The man blushed in embarrassment. Sigh. "Don't say that, I'm embarrassed. Little brother, it's good that you can forgive me. If I hadn't dug that trap, you wouldn't have fallen into it." It turned out that the man was still feeling guilty about that. Yu comforted him. "It's fine. It was fine as long as he was fine." Chapter 1252. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Yu felt cold sweat in his heart. It turned out that this man was still feeling guilty about this matter. When Lingling heard that Yu was going to stay tonight, she was so happy that she jumped 3 feet high. Yay! Daddy is so awesome. So awesome. I'm so happy that big brother is staying at our house tonight. She was overjoyed, and a smile bloomed on her face. Children always lacked playmates, and for a child of her age, having one more playmate was the greatest joy. Moreover, in Lingling's eyes, Yu was beautiful with fair skin and big eyes. Hence, she especially liked this handsome big brother. Yu frowned slightly and ignored Lingling. He asked, so in such a big village, only the convenience store has a phone that can contact the outside world? That's right. Little brother, I'm not going to lie to you. In our village, the traffic signal is rather backward. There's a big mountain outside and a big forest in the middle. That area is under the control of the government. Plus, our village is neither big nor small. It's vast but sparsely populated. There are only a few hundred villagers in total. That's why the signal tower couldn't be built. As for the phone in the convenience store, it's quite fashionable in our village. Even so, the signal is intermittent. Hee. The man laughed awkwardly. His face was red and he looked a little embarrassed. Although Yu was disappointed, he didn't complain. After all, this man was so nice to him. Besides, staying for one night was nothing. Hence, he nodded and said, "Okay, I'll wait and see tomorrow." The man nodded and explained carefully, "But I'm afraid that your parents will be worried about you. I'm also very anxious. But there's no other way. The village is not like the city. All the facilities are backward. It's okay. But I'll have to trouble you today." Yu smiled and thanked him gracefully. The man was a little flattered. He rubbed his hands together and looked a little nervous. He suddenly laughed dryly and asked, "Are you hungry?" "No, I just ate a few pieces of taro cake." "Oh. Do you want a few more?" The man was so enthusiastic that Yu couldn't handle it. "Oh. Do you want some water?" "Okay, thank you, uncle." Yu was famous for being a sweet talker. When the man heard that, he was overjoyed. Yu was not like those children in the village who were used to being wild since they were young. But he was only 7 years old. Yu was very polite. Yu's heart was sweeter than honey. From their conversation, Yu learned that the man's name was Wuxia Xianxia and that he was an ordinary villager in the village. He owned a few acres of land behind his house and planted a few acres of wheat and vegetables. He knew how to hunt, so whenever he was free, he would hunt for game in the mountains. Occasionally, when he was lucky, he would hunt a few deer and sell their skins at the market. Usually, he would be able to fetch a good price and not have to worry about his monthly expenses. Yu's days were peaceful and comfortable. Zhao Xiangjuan's wife, Li Ru, was a typical farmer's wife. Her skin was dark and rough, and her voice was a little loud. However, she was warm and friendly. It was afternoon now. The sun outside was gradually getting hotter. Chapter 1253. Lingling pulled him along and proudly introduced Yu to a few of her friends in the village. They were all young children. The oldest was 12 years old and the youngest was 7 years old. They were all immature brats. Yu, who was secretly criticizing these children in his heart, did not realize that, in the eyes of others, he was also a brat who was still wet behind the ears. When the group of children saw that a new friend had arrived, they surrounded Yu and sized him up. "Lingling, who is this guy? My father brought him back. I heard that he came from the city." "From the city?" Hearing these words, all the children's eyes shone brightly. They crowded in front of Yu and asked him curiously. "The children in the city are just like what they show on TV. Their skin is white and tender. Hey, what's your name?" The child who spoke was called Go. "His name is Yu. You can call him Yu." Zhao Linghua introduced him enthusiastically. "Yu. Wow. That's a nice name. It sounds so Western. It's not as old-fashioned as my name." You're so good looking. You look like a white porcelain doll. I heard from my father that the children in the city are all little princesses and young masters. Are you a young master too? Yu's lips twitched for a while. Zhao Linghua gently tugged at Yu's sleeve. Because she was shy, her face was red. She lowered her head slightly and said expectantly, "Little brother, do you want to play with us?" Lingling. Li Ru pretended to be angry and said, "Little brother is injured. How can he play with you? Don't mess around. Also, have you finished the homework that the teacher gave you? You only know how to play and don't do your homework. How are you going to get into the city's schools when you grow up?" Ling Ling made a face. "Mom, I've finished my homework. That's why I came out to play." She stuck out her tongue and turned around. Then she grabbed Yu's hand and ran out of the house. Li Ru stomped her feet in anger. In front of the door, there was a large open space. On the ground, there was a crooked drawing of a lattice with chalk. A little boy in dirty clothes was half squatting on the ground, fiddling with a small piece of tile. His pair of clear black and white eyes were fully focused in front of him. Lingling introduced the little boy as her older brother, Zhao Tianyu. The little guy was very young, no more than 7 years old, but his appearance was very delicate. His pair of phoenix eyes were especially beautiful, his white and flawless skin, and his delicate facial features were completely different from the appearance of the Zhao couple. At that time, the gossip in the village said that the Zhao couple could not have children, and this child was adopted by the Zhao couple at a high price. Usually, they worshipped him like a little ancestor. In the village, there was a saying that raising a child would help one prepare for one's old age. It was also said that there were 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no children was the worst. Therefore, the couple insisted on having a boy. Their family was also well off, so under the doting, the little guy's food and clothing were considered good among the children in the village. Later on, Zhao Linghua was born. His name was Zhao Tianyu, and his nickname was Daodu. He grew up wearing the same pants as Zhao Linghua and always played behind her. His favorite game was hopscotch. Chapter 1254. Therefore, he was not interested in the game at all. He sat at the door like an old man. The boy in front of her was full of childish nature. Even though he could not run steadily, he was very playful. He pulled Zhao Linghua and cried, pestering her to play with him. "Lingling, I'll jump first. Watch me. This time, I won't go back on my word." Lil P smiled at her, revealing a row of white teeth. Lingling said a number weakly, 8. Lil P made a sound of agreement and threw the ball with all her might. She then jumped around excitedly in the grid. Yu sat at the door, resting his chin on one hand as he lazily basked in the sun. Lingling kept asking him to play with her, but Yu was not very interested in this. His indifference made Lingling feel a little disappointed, so she played with Lil P listlessly. Not long after, the other children came running over one after another. The group of children started to make a ruckus. It was the sound of children arguing, quarreling, and laughing. It sounded carefree, clear, and loud. It was like a free bird, chirping non-stop, as if it didn't know exhaustion. Yu looked at the children who were making a ruckus and suddenly sighed. What a group of energetic children. Not long after, the Zhao family's door was filled with people. It turned out that the villagers had come over out of curiosity to see what was going on. They had heard that Zhao Xianxia had come back from hunting in the mountains and rescued a child. When he brought the child back, he was covered in blood, scaring everyone. They did not know where the child came from and why he ran into the mountains for no reason. The mountains were so big, so they thought that the child's parents were heartless and abandoned the child. Speaking of which, among the villagers of Anyang village, many of the parents in the city were too heartless. There were a few times when human traffickers brought children from the city and lied to the honest and kind villagers that the children were abandoned by the people in the city. Most of the villagers were kind, and some of them did not have children, so they spent a lot of money to adopt the children. But in reality, they were all trafficked by human traffickers. It was just that these villagers rarely interacted with the outside world and were all natives. Therefore, word spread like wildfire. The villagers' impression of the people in the city was that they were rich and respectable. There was also no lack of heartless parents who didn't even want their own children and casually threw them away. Therefore, some people thought that Yu's parents abandoned her, so they asked, Yu, do your parents abandon you? Is that why he threw you up the mountain? No, Yu answered honestly, but did not say anything else. But when those people saw that it was a child, they teased him and pretended to be serious as they said, You have been deceived. My parents definitely don't want you anymore. That's why I lost you. Do you want to come to my house and be my son? Yu's face instantly darkened. She said word by word, no. The woman's face stiffened. In fact, she really thought that Yu had been abandoned by a heartless couple in the city. Didn't she hear that the city was implementing family planning? So, she thought that they abandoned her and threw her into the mountains. Looking at Yu's handsome face, she was tempted. Chapter 1255. In this village, it was inevitable that people would gossip about her if she did not have a son. If she did not have a son, people would say that she had no descendants. Her husband and mother-in-law, on the other hand, would point at her and scold her for being a disappointment. Hence, she had been thinking of adopting a boy and letting him take care of them when they were old. You can be my son. I'll take care of you and treat you well, okay? Come with Auntie. The woman felt embarrassed and tried to coax her again. Yu refused. No. Lingling spread her arms in front of Yu and said, Auntie Feng, even if Yu was abandoned by his parents, he'll stay at my house. He won't go to your house. Everyone laughed. A more sensible child said, Auntie Feng, Yu is timid. Don't scare him. He then turned to Yu and Lingling. Auntie Feng is just joking with you. He. Yu was annoyed. He did not like it when the elders teased him like this. He was smart, so he could tell that this auntie was joking with him. Ordinary children would not be able to tell and would be scared to tears. Lingling quickly chased after him when she saw him get up and leave. Little brother, where are you going? I'm just walking around. Don't follow me. No, I'll walk with you, okay? Okay? Dishing Financial Group. The share transfer ceremony was supposed to take place at around 10 in the morning. However, due to Mu Linfeng's repeated delays, the meeting was delayed until the afternoon. In the CEO's office, Mu Yaja sat at the table, fiddling with a Zippo lighter in his hand. Beside him, Mu Linfeng sat on the sofa silently. Other than Mu Lianjue, all the major shareholders of Dishing Financial Group were present. The board of directors of Dishing Financial Group was mostly made up of internal members of the Mu family. Other than Mu Yaja, who held the most shares, Mu Linfeng and Mu Shumin were the second and third shareholders. Mu Shumin was Mu Sheng's first wife's daughter. According to seniority, Mu Yaja had to address her as Little Aunt. Due to her secret identity, Mu Shumin had a rather conspicuous position in the political world. Therefore, she had never participated in the board meetings of Dishing Financial Group, no matter how big or small. However, it was different this time. There was actually news that her nephew was transferring his shares to Mu Lianjue. When she found out about this from Mu Linfeng, she was the first to disagree. Before Mu Yaja arrived, Mu Linfeng had already briefed them on the matter. When they heard that Mu Yaja was willing to give up his shares of Dishing Financial Group for a woman, everyone's eyes widened in shock. They were taken aback because, as bystanders, they knew very well that the man was only 27 years old. What exactly had he experienced in order to reach such a prominent position today? One must know that the Mu family's internal affairs were complicated and involved a lot of interests. Not counting the members of the main family, Just the side branches of the Mu family alone had many outstanding people. To be able to reach such a level in such a big family was not as simple as shedding a layer of skin. To say that they fought until their heads bled was an understatement. Chapter 1256. It was not because of anything else but Mu Yaja's capabilities. Despite his young age, he already had extraordinary capabilities. Moreover, he had the support of Mu Sheng, the head of the family, and his second uncle, Mu Linfeng. That was why he could reach where he was today. It was like an emperor in ancient times who had conquered thousands of miles of land, but now, he had to give up his imperial power for a woman. How could they not be shocked? Ceding the shares to Mu Lianjue meant that there would be a change in the head of the Mu group from now on. This was quite a big change for the board of directors. The change of Disheng's CEO was closely related to the board's interests. A few years ago, when Mu Yaja took over Disheng from Mu Sheng's hands, everyone was skeptical of him. At that time, Mu Yaja was only in his early 20s. Everyone was against handing over such a huge financial group to him. At that time, Disheng was facing a critical moment of life and death. As the CEO, he could decide the life and death of the Mu group at any time. With a single thought, all the accumulated hegemony could be destroyed overnight. The board of directors urgently needed a wise monarch to lead the financial group in the right direction. Mu Yaja had just taken office for a few days, and a few shareholders on the board of directors had made things difficult for him. They thought that he was inexperienced and could not perfectly help Disheng overcome its crisis. However, a year later, Mu Yaja gave the board of directors a perfect answer. He proved to them that not only could he do it, but he could also do it well. Today, Disheng Financial Group's businesses covered the entire world. Shopping malls, resorts, real estate, entertainment, internet, every branch of the company was much better than the other businesses in the same industry. Only then did the board of directors have nothing to say and truly acknowledge this young and promising CEO. In the past 5 years, the quarterly financial reports had increased by 100 times compared to 5 years ago. There was such a rumor circulating within Disheng Financial Group. As long as one owned even 1% of Disheng Financial Group's shares, one would not have to worry about food or clothing for the rest of one's life and enjoy endless glory and wealth. As for Mu Yaja's Disheng Financial Group, as long as he owned 0.001% of the company's shares, the annual dividends would be equivalent to the profits of an industrial company for an entire year. It could be said that Mu Yaja would not be left with nothing after leaving Disheng. After so many years, the connections he had accumulated during his reign, coupled with his own abilities, were more than enough to create an empire that truly belonged to him. As for Disheng, if he left him, he would probably go back to how he was a few years ago. The country's economy would also undergo great changes. In the foreseeable future, the economy would decline, industries would decline, and the stock market would shake. As the saying goes, a country cannot be without a ruler for a day. A country cannot leave its unified, correct, and effective management. Relatively speaking, this theory was very useful in a family business. Similarly, Disheng Financial Group could not afford to lose a wise leader. "You brat, don't tell me you're really going to cede your shares to that old thing?" Mu Linfeng slammed the table in a thunderous rage. Mu Yaja sneered inwardly. It seemed that this second uncle of his was going to bring the board of directors to denounce him. Chapter 1257. He had put in a lot of effort into making the Mu Group what it was today. Since Disheng Financial Group had developed to this point, he had not been able to get to where he was without his help. Back then, he was young and full of talent. However, having the ability did not mean that he had the opportunity to show off his skills. After all, it was very difficult for him to gain the approval of the board of directors when he was only in his early 20s without the accumulation of connections. Back then, it was also his second uncle who supported him against everyone's objections. His original intention was to hand over the Mu Group to him so that it could reach a higher level. Mu Yaja did not disappoint him. He did it. However, now, he was actually willing to give up the Mu Group's great foundation for a woman? What Mu Linfeng did not want to admit was that even if Mu Yaja left the Mu Group, he would still become the cream of the crop and the cream of the crop. However, if he left the Mu Group, it would only sink rapidly and would no longer be the overlord who could summon the wind and rain. Mu Linfeng's worries were not unfounded. As early as 2 years ago, Mu Yaja had started to cultivate his own power outside. He knew very well that no matter how big the Disheng financial group was, it could not be bigger than the sky. No matter how deep the foundation was, it could not be deeper than the ground. Since ancient times, there had never been a family that could run rampant for hundreds of years. Everything had always started from nothing and then from something to nothing. Yin and yang alternated, and the cycle repeated itself. No matter how small a grain of sand was, it could still accumulate from small to large. No matter how big a foundation was, it could still collapse. Moreover, the Mu Group was a family-run business. The capital and shares were mainly controlled by a member of the Mu family. He was already sick of it. Every time he made a decision, there would always be a few small figures from the family who would jump out to protest. He was also sick of being suppressed by the elders and being ordered around. He was Mu Yaja. There was no saying that he could not live without the Mu family. Since he could push the Mu Group to the top 6 years ago, he could also build his own empire within 6 years. Moreover, he was such a proud man. Once he grasped the opportunity, he would build the world that belonged to him. In fact, in the past few years, he had been secretly diverting people from his businesses. In the past few years, he had gathered people to form an elite group. If he left the Mu Group, other than a large group of elites leaving with him, he would also take a group of talents that he had cultivated with him. Other than that, he would also ruthlessly cut off a large piece of Disheng's flesh. After all, that was what he deserved. The Mu family was such a big family. They had outstanding talents, but they also had lazy good-for-nothings. These people were like locusts, gnawing at the monument that he had condensed with all his hard work until it was full of holes. He had already deeply experienced the drawbacks of family-run enterprises. The internal structure of the Mu Group was gradually decaying. He did not want his hard work to be dragged down by these locusts. He, Mu Yaja, would never allow anyone to be above him. Be it Mu Sheng or Mu Lianjue. It was still Mu Linfeng. Good. He was so proud. How could he tolerate these people becoming his fetters? As for the kindness that Mu Linfeng had shown him, he was grateful. However, after working hard for him for so many years, it should be enough to repay him, right? Chapter 1258. Mu Shumin paused for a moment before asking sternly, "Have you ever thought about whether it's worth it for you to do this? Is it worth it for a woman?" Mu Yaja raised his head and looked at her coldly. "Why isn't it worth it?" "It's worth it." "Worth it?" Mu Shumin coldly snorted, but disapprovingly. He. I'd like to see for myself who this woman is to make my nephew, who has always been indifferent to women, fall so deeply in love with her. Yaja, don't be silly. You'll really regret it if you give up the Mu Group's foundation for a dirty woman. Mu Yaja's lips curled up slightly, clearly disagreeing with her words. In fact, Yun Shishir was already under his protection. The 2 children had already escaped from Mu Lianjue's captivity, but Yu Yu's whereabouts were still unknown. Although she was not in Mu Lianjue's hands, he could very well cancel this matter and not transfer the shares to him. However, he was worried that the latter would fly into a rage out of humiliation and secretly send someone to kill Yu Yu. If that happened, the loss would outweigh the gain. If a mere Mu Group could be used to exchange for Yuntianyo's safety, then this deal was worth it. Of course, Mu Linfeng would not let this matter rest. "Auntie, do you think that I don't know what I'm doing? I, Mu Yaja, am not someone who can't live without anyone. No matter what, you can't transfer the shares in your hands to someone else. You should know how important you are to Disheng and what kind of position you have in the company. Mu Yaja stood up abruptly. His slender figure was tall and straight, and his aura was domineering. He slowly leaned against the table with his hands in his trouser pockets and lazily declared, "Auntie, I hope that you'll understand one thing, Disheng can be mine. However, I will never belong to Disheng." Mu Shumin was infuriated, but he suppressed his anger and tried his best to calm down as he negotiated with him. "Yaja, I know that you are capable and charismatic. But at the same time, you should also be responsible, right?" Mu Yaja remained expressionless and did not speak. Mu Shumin became even more anxious. However, due to her status, she had to maintain a certain attitude. Thus, she maintained a reserved demeanor from beginning to end. Mu Linfeng slammed the table and stood up. "Give up. I will never let you play with our hard work like this. There is only one CEO in Mu Group, and it can only be you. Yaja, listen to me. I've been through this before. When I was young, I was as impulsive as you. But second uncle knows your ambition and your courage. However, things like women will only become your fetters. You shouldn't be so impulsive because of a woman." "Women? Something like that?" Mu Yaja furrowed his brows all of a sudden. His gaze was as cold as an iceberg crashing into it. Chapter 1259. Mu Linfeng ignored his expression and said coldly, "I understand. You're not young anymore, and it's time for you to start a family. However, you should be clear about your status. You can have women, but they can't be those indecent ones. I'll find a few more women for you another day. No matter what kind of women they are, as long as you want them, with your status, which woman won't want to throw herself at you? Why are you so stubborn? Don't tell me that it has to be her." Mu Yaja's lips curled into a playful smile. His handsome brows raised slightly, and his eyes were filled with devilish charm. "I have to have her. What can you say?" "No." Mu Shumin suddenly stood up and said agitatedly, "No matter what, that woman can't be." "Why can't she be?" Mu Yaja retorted. He wanted to hear what Mu Shumin would say in front of so many people. Mu Shumin snorted and looked around. Before he could say anything, he put on the airs of an elder and a superior and raised his head high. Apart from a few important figures of the Mu family, Mu Shumin, Mu Linfeng and his wife, Li Lijun, and Mu Yancheng and his wife, Rong Lanlin, were all present. The remaining members of the Mu family were the fans of these people. At most, they were here to show their support. If they were asked to speak, they would not dare to do so at all. In front of Mu Yaja, they would not dare to act rashly no matter what. However, just Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng alone were more difficult to deal with. Their seniority was much higher than his. Back then, Mu Sheng had been looking forward to Mu Wanru marrying into the family. Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng stood on the same side and were against it. The main reason why Mu Wanru could not marry him was because of their repeated opposition. Speaking of which, these two people had a lot of power, and they were currently the two biggest obstacles in front of him. He admitted that Mu Linfeng had indeed promoted and helped him. He had even saved him from dire straits. Back then, as the legitimate grandson of the main wife, he had outstanding ability and was the most likely candidate for the successor. Thus, after his parents passed away one after another, he was all alone in the Mu family and treaded on thin ice. It was Mu Linfeng who took him away and gave him a superior environment to grow up in. For this, he was grateful. He was a sentimental person. At the same time, he was also a person who knew how to be grateful. It was precisely because of this that he did not do so even though he had so many opportunities to transfer Mu Group's assets to his own name. However, as time passed, he gradually realized that Mu Linfeng's care and support for him wasn't pure. There seemed to be a motive behind it, and it was as if he was using him. He was very unhappy about this. Although he did not show it, in the past few years, he gradually rebelled against Mu Linfeng's orders and no longer obeyed him. Mu Linfeng must be wary of this and was secretly dividing the board of directors. Those little tricks could not be hidden from him at all. Mu Shumin, on the other hand, was completely using him. In fact, she could not wait for Mu Yaxia to abdicate his position. If he transferred his shares to her, she would have nothing to say. Chapter 1260. Mu Shumin's original intention was for Mu Yaxia to be the head of the family for a few years while secretly carving up the family's assets. When the time came, she would push Mu Yaxia out of his position and let her son take it. However, it was clearly not the right time for Mu Yaxia to give up his position. Her son was only in his teens and was still young. She would have to wait until he was at least in his 20s before she could find an opportunity to help him take the position. She was born from a concubine and did not have much status in the family. However, she had inherited her mother's beauty. She served in the military when she was young and married into a prestigious family when she was in her 20s. Her status in the Mu family instantly rose, and with her husband's prominent status, she had the right to speak in the family. In fact, Mu Lianjue's matter was not that simple. One must know that most of the people he had sent this time had military backgrounds. In the entire Mu family, Mu Linfeng had the deepest military background. In other words, he was fully capable of stopping Mu Lianjue, but he did not. Why? It was because he wanted to use Mu Lianjue to get rid of Yun Shishir and her son, ruthlessly kicking away these two stumbling blocks in front of Mu Yaxia. This way, he could secretly use Mu Lianjue to get rid of these two thorns in his flesh without having to make a move himself. He did not wish for Mu Yaxia to have any attachments or weaknesses in his heart. Mu Linfeng was afraid that a person like him would become irresolute and indecisive once he had any attachments. This would delay the Mu group's future because of a bit of affection for a girl. Mu Yaxia was not stupid. He could tell that his uncle had ulterior motives. Thus, he secretly made a decision on the spot. It seemed that there was no need to be merciful to these people anymore. He would not transfer his shares. However, he would not be merciful to them anymore either. Mu Shumin sized up his expression and suddenly sneered. Yaxia, it's not that I want to nag at you, but you can play with women, but you should also judge the situation and size up the situation. No matter what, you can't cross the line or go overboard. You should be clear of the Mu family's rules. Since when did you set your eyes on a woman with a dubious background in the entertainment industry? In my eyes, you've always been a child with good taste. Some women can't be touched. I know the entertainment industry well. Women who can make a name for themselves must be unrestrained behind the scenes. I've heard of Yun Shishir's name before. She's not a clean woman. Listen to Auntie's advice, stay away from this kind of woman. Play with other women. Play? Mu Yaxia coldly tugged at the corner of his lips as his eyes turned frosty. Auntie, you're mistaken about something. He was serious when it came to Yun Shishir. He was not just playing around with her. Mu Shumin was surprised to hear that. What is it? Speaking of which, I happen to have something to announce to the few elders. Mu Yaxia suddenly turned around and sat down on the sofa. Facing the few important figures of the Mu family, he announced, previously, the Mu group announced a media conference, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, it has been postponed again and again. After this is over, regardless of whether I'm the CEO of the Mu group or not, I will announce my marriage at this media conference. Marriage announcement? Chapter 1261. Mu Shumin widened her eyes in shock. Who are you planning to announce your marriage to? She suddenly guessed something. Don't tell me it's that Yun Shishir? Yes, I've decided to announce my marriage to her. He crossed his legs elegantly, and his domineering aura swept through every corner of the office. Mu Yaxia coldly swept his gaze across the room and said in a cold voice, I know this is a sudden announcement, so I'm informing all of you first. No way. Mu Shumin was the first to stand up and reject him, sizing him up in disbelief. Her face, however, was filled with unconcealable disappointment and heartache. She initially thought that her nephew was just toying with that woman, but even if it was just a game, she would not allow it. She did not expect him to say something so shocking, saying that he would announce his marriage to her at a media conference. This news was too shocking. That kind of woman will never be able to step into the Mu family's doorstep. Xianxia, are you crazy? If you marry that woman, what will the outside world think of us? I heard that she's the woman who was your surrogate 6 years ago. I also heard that she gave birth to 2 children back then, and in the past 6 years, she secretly hid one of them. This is clearly a conspiracy. To think that you're so smart, can't you see that she's planning to use her son as a bargaining chip to marry into the Mu family? She should take a look at her status and see if she's worthy of the title of the Mu family's young mistress. That kind of woman isn't even fit to carry my shoes. Mu Shumin knitted her delicate brows. Her heavily made-up face was filled with disdain and contempt. She had always been prejudiced against women in the entertainment industry. She always felt that they were dirty and cheap, and that they would do anything to climb the social ladder. Therefore, in her eyes, Yun Shishir was the same. Mu Linfeng's face darkened as he expressionlessly said, "Xianxia, second uncle should also think that you should start your own family at your age. However, I'm also opposed to this woman marrying into the family. Second uncle's attitude is clear: as long as I'm still alive, I won't allow her to take a step into the Mu family." His tone was firm and unyielding, leaving no room for rebuttal. Mu Xianxia scanned the crowd's disapproving looks and sat up straight expressionlessly. His languid posture resembled that of an elegant emperor. His expression was leisurely and indifferent as he slowly parted his thin lips. "Announcing my marriage to all of you is out of respect for all of you. I'm just informing the elders of the Mu family. It doesn't mean that you have the right to stop or interfere." Have the right to interfere? I'm your aunt. As your elder, don't I have the right to ask about your marriage? Chapter 1262. I dote on you, so I can't just watch you marry a slut. Can you understand Auntie's good intentions? Besides, this woman wants to use the child to blackmail you. He. Dream on. I'll put it this way, Mu Yichen's child will be acknowledged by the Muse. However, we won't acknowledge Yun Shishir's son. She can forget about bringing that little b*st*rd into the Muse house. Little b*st*rd? Mu Xianxia narrowed his eyes dangerously. Mu Shumin was startled. She was well aware that she had been too agitated. So much so that she had blurted out some words without thinking. She was extremely vexed for a moment. So, she fiercely bit her red lips and stopped talking. Mu Linfeng glared at her angrily, too. She called Yun Tianyu a little b***st**road. Was she not insulting the Mu family? No matter how useless Yun Tianyu was, the blood of the Mu family still flowed in his veins. Mu Xianxia smiled and retorted coldly, "What's wrong, auntie? I'm the one marrying her. It's not up to you to worry about my woman, is it? How is it not up to me to worry?" Mu Shumin's tone turned sharp when she saw the sarcasm in his words. "Xianxia, oh, Xianxia, I think you're getting more and more. How dare you say such disgraceful words? Are you blind? You don't want a good woman, but you want a shady woman? You can afford to lose face, but the Muse can't. It's fine if you don't do something stupid, but you implicate the rest of the family. They can't even raise their heads after you. Disheng CEO is actually marrying a showbiz actress as his wife. Just thinking about it makes me blush." As Mu Shumin spoke, she sneered and said, "Moreover, why don't you think about your current status? Yes, you're the strongest candidate for the Mu family's head, but I hope you're clear that you're just a candidate and have yet to ascend to the position of the family head. Don't lose your position because of a woman. The loss outweighs the gain." "That's right, Xianxia. Don't let your emotions get the better of you. You're being too impulsive." Mu Xianxia raised his eyebrows slightly. Don't tell me that since I'm the head of the family, I have the final say in this marriage? We'll talk about it when you become the patriarch. Mu Shumin sneered coldly. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Mu Yaja's subtle movements. He clasped his hands together. His left index finger and thumb were rubbing something carefully. Mu Yaja opened his eyes, his aura intimidating. Mu Shumin suddenly widened his eyes and looked over. She suddenly noticed the ruby ring he wore on his right thumb. Inside the ruby ring is the Mu family's emblem. A dragon seal that pierced through the clouds and swallowed the heavens. That's the Mu family's family tattoo that has been passed down for generations. The possession of this ring means the possession of the Mu clan's supreme power. Only the head of the Mu Jia can have this ancient ring that has been passed down for hundreds of years. Mu Shumin's eyes suddenly widened. Mu Linfeng followed her astonished gaze and could not help but be shocked as well. When the crowd saw the ancient ring on his hand, their faces stiffened, and their eyes could not help but be filled with reverence. When did this happen? Mu Shumin could not even speak coherently. Mu Yaja did not even raise his eyebrows and remained silent. Chapter 1263. From today onwards, he would officially become the head of the Mu family. Mu Linfeng was also shocked speechless. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a mocking smile. As you can see, I'm now the head of the household and the most powerful person in the Mu family. I don't want to hear anyone say otherwise about who I'm marrying. Everyone fell into a strange silence. No one dared to speak. Although Mu Shumin could not suppress his anger, he did not know what to say. Mu Linfeng said gloomily, "Let me ask you again. Do you really want to marry that woman? Must you marry her?" "Second uncle, I've already made my stance clear. No matter how much you ask, it's useless." Mu Yaja raised his chin arrogantly. His attitude was arrogant and insufferably arrogant. "Second brother, pay attention to your words. Is this the attitude you should have when speaking to your second uncle? How can marriage be a trifling matter? I'm also considering this from your perspective. It's fine if you don't appreciate my kindness, but you're still acting so overbearing." Mu Yancheng spoke up from the side. Mu Yaja swept a cold glance over. His eyes were sharp and contained a sharp warning. "You have no right to criticize my decisions. Who are you to talk to me like that?" Mu Yancheng immediately shut his mouth. His face alternated between green and white in embarrassment. As a side branch, it was indeed inappropriate for him to butt in. Although he was only a year younger than Mu Yaja, there was a huge disparity in their status. He was jealous, but more than that, he was unconvinced. Mu Yancheng was also young and impetuous. In his heart, he was not much worse than Mu Yaja. He just lacked the opportunity and status. In terms of ability, he boasted that he was extraordinary. Therefore, when he was pressured by Mu Yaja, he felt indignant. What right did he have to be so arrogant and overbearing? Was it just because he was the head of the Mu family now? Did he think that he was so great because he was the head of the household? Just because he's the Mu Jia's patriarch, he can overestimate himself and challenge the authority of the Mu Jia's rules? What are you being so arrogant for? I wonder how long you'll be able to sit on the patriarch's seat. Mu Yancheng cursed fiercely in his heart. He was extremely unwilling, but he could only force a smile on his face. "Do you have any objections to this marriage?" Mu Yaja asked. Mu Shumin's face was full of anger as he said in a sarcastic tone, "Hee, you're the patriarch now, so of course you have the final say. I just feel that your second uncle really made a mistake back then. Why did he support you? Now that you're in power, you're going to drag the entire clan down with you." Mu Yaja's cold gaze swept over and landed on Mu Shumin's body. The hidden sharpness in his gaze was enough to stab her. Mu Shumin was immediately enraged by his stare. "Why are you glaring at me? You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because you're the patriarch? No matter what, I'm still your aunt. Don't be too self-righteous. Humph, I hope that's the last time you say those words just now. Don't let me hear them again. Are you threatening me? Mu Shumin stood up agitatedly. Shumin, stop talking. Just let him go. He'll regret it sooner or later. Mu Linfeng said angrily. Chapter 1264. Sometimes, he lamented the fact that he had so many family members despite the size of the Mu family. The same blood flowed in their bodies as he did. And yet? Sometimes, these people might be your family, but they didn't seem like family at all. Everyone here seemed concerned on the surface, but in reality? They couldn't wait to find a suitable opportunity to force him to abdicate. In a family where fame and fortune were the most important things, there was no need to talk about kinship. Since they didn't give him any face, it was ridiculous to expect him to care about kinship. Mu Yaja said coldly, "Second uncle, I've never regretted my decisions." "I thought you knew me well enough." Mu Linfeng scoffed. He was clearly so angry that he could not speak. Mu Shumin said from the side, "Then what about the upcoming board meeting? Are you really going to transfer your shares to your fourth uncle?" "As long as second uncle promises me one thing, I'll cancel the shareholders' meeting." "What is it?" Mu Yaja's voice deepened. "Keep your subordinates in check. Since when can an outsider order the people in the capital military district around as he pleases?" Mu Linfeng's heart skipped a beat as he exchanged glances with his nephew. He understood that his nephew had seen through his intentions. Immediately, he sneered and nodded. "Good. I promise you. Then, I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Cancel the shareholders' meeting, and I'll leave fourth uncle's matter to you, second uncle. I don't want things to escalate to the point where I have to resort to my own means to deal with it." Mu Yaja stood up and walked to the door. Suddenly, he stopped and turned around slowly. "However, I still have something to warn you all." He turned around and swept his gaze across the crowd as he enunciated each and every word clearly. "If anyone dares to lay a finger on them under my nose, don't blame me for being rude." With that, he strode away without looking back. After the door was slammed shut, Mu Shumin was so angry that he trembled all over. He stood up agitatedly and pointed in the direction Mu Yaja left, his face red with anger. Mu Linfeng sat at the side in silence. Mu Yaja, on the other hand, had thoroughly disappointed him. This brat, it seems that after becoming the Mu Jia's patriarch, he doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. His wings have hardened and he has the ability to fly. A few senior people sat at the side with cold faces, causing the temperature in the huge office to drop to the extreme in an instant. Mu Yancheng was so angry that his face turned white. After being humiliated by Mu Yaja just now, it was hard for him to vent his anger. He turned to accuse Mu Linfeng. "Second uncle, I don't mean to say anything bad about him, but this brat is too disrespectful." "That's right. Yaja's performance today was truly chilling. Previously, because second brother had promoted him, I had always thought highly of him. Why is it that now, her temperament is quite unreasonable? This woman is really a scourge if we leave her alive. Second uncle, look, some time ago, he actually went to the Song family to seek revenge for this woman. Now that the Song family is here to complain, where is the Mu family's face? Sigh, that woman really has some tricks up her sleeves. I don't know what she's capable of, but she's actually leading him by the nose. What a scourge." Chapter 1265. What should we do now? Don't tell me we're really going to let Yaja marry that woman? That's one more thing to do. The Mu family has always been in favor of marriage between families of equal social status. That woman isn't of equal social status, and she's not even chaste. Is she even worthy? Mu Shumin snorted at his uncle. "Second brother, what do you say?" Are you really going to watch him fool around and not do anything about it? What can I do? I've already said and tried to stop him, but he just won't listen. What's the use of that? I admit that Yaja has been in the Mu group for so many years, and he has indeed contributed a lot to the company's development. However, that doesn't mean that he can do whatever he wants just because he has achieved so much. Mu Linfeng muttered, that lad's achievements are immeasurable, and I'm very satisfied with him. For him to be able to sit on the patriarch's seat, he deserved it. The only thing that displeases me is that he's too stubborn, just like his father. I've always thought that he's a cold person who knows his limits in everything he does. I just didn't expect him to lose his sense of direction after falling in love. That woman seems to be someone who can't be underestimated. To be able to charm that lad to such an extent, he. Mu Linfeng sneered. Young man, it's not good to be too arrogant. You'll eventually lose out in the vanity field. Yaja is arrogant by nature. He's a little too arrogant. Mu Linfeng interrupted these people's condemnation. However, that lad's capability is obvious to all. Who doesn't make mistakes in their life? Who can pat their chest and say that they've never made a mistake in their life? Forget it. Forget it? Mu Shumin was a little agitated. Second brother, what do you mean by forget it? Are you really not going to do anything about this? Now's not the time. Yunshirsher, that woman, must not be left alive. I'll deal with her sooner or later, but now's not the time. What do you mean? Everyone was confused. Mu Linfeng said casually, since he insists on marrying her, we can only smooth things over. After a while, I'll arrange a clean identity for her so that people won't laugh at the Mu family. This was the only thing he could do. Mu Shumin was so angry that his blood boiled. Clearly, he could not accept Mu Linfeng's decision. I don't agree. Shumin, listen to me. Mu Linfeng's tone was unyielding. Mu Shumin had no choice but to swallow his protest and remain silent. Mu Yancheng said from the side, second uncle, sometimes you're really biased. How is second brother better than me? If you had supported me in the past, I would have obeyed your orders, no matter how big or small, like an imperial edict. I wouldn't have disobeyed you in the slightest. Look at him now, he's actually giving you face. How infuriating. Anger flashed across Mu Linfeng's face as he coldly rebuked, how dare you? It's not up to you to judge what I do. You still have the cheek to say that. Since you were young, second uncle has never mistreated you. What did you do, though? You keep saying that you're not inferior to him in any way. What about the reality? The difference between you and Yaja isn't just a little bit. Yaja is more capable and outstanding than you. If you were half as capable as him, you wouldn't be like this now. Isn't it because he's the legitimate son and I'm a concubine's son? Mu Yancheng grumbled, feeling wronged. Chapter 1266. Yaja is still young. Sometimes, he doesn't know any better and will inevitably take the wrong path. I'll try to persuade him when the time comes. If it really doesn't work, we'll come up with another plan. Shu Min, what you said today was too extreme. It won't do you any good to anger him. He paused for a moment before saying with a frown, I know what he's capable of doing. That's why you should know your limits when you speak to him in the future. Got it, second brother, Mu Shumin reluctantly agreed. After that, Mu Linfeng made a call to the military. Mu Lianjue's men were all deployed from the military. In other words, his every move was under his nose. He was aware of this matter, but he did not do anything because, as Mu Yaja had expected, he wanted to use his brother to get rid of Yunshirsher, who was in his way. Unexpectedly, Mu Yaja's attitude toward this was unexpectedly firm. He had no choice but to stop. With a call from him, the people in the military immediately obeyed the imperial edict and withdrew all their men. When Mu Lianjue learned of this matter, he knew that the situation was hopeless, but he was indignant. Hence, while the men in the military district were sent back, the assassins he had sent out were still on their way. He had no intention of calling them back. Wuxia had caused him to suffer greatly, so he had to give him a taste of his own medicine. The sky gradually darkened. Yu sat on the mountaintop, bored to death. Zhao Linghua was still chattering in his ear, but he chose to automatically block her. She did not seem to have any intention of stopping. Yu finally could not hold it in any longer. "Aren't you tired?" "What? Aren't you tired of talking all the time?" She stuck her tongue out and smiled. "Now that you mention it, I'm a little thirsty." Thus, she pulled his hand. "Let's go, I'll bring you to quench your thirst." Yu was reluctant, but she was too strong for him to do so. She jogged happily with him and came to a mountain pass. Walking down a long flight of stone steps, Yu suddenly saw a jade-green color. His curiosity was piqued. He raised his head and looked around. At the foot of the mountain, there was a green mountain spring. It was a natural spring. At a glance, it was green and clear, so clear that the bottom could be seen. Let me tell you a secret. The spring water here is called Holy Mother Spring. The spring water is very, very sweet. You can drink it directly. Every household in the village drinks the water from here. Yu was surprised. You can drink it directly? He couldn't be blamed for feeling strange. Nowadays, in the city, the pollution was getting worse day by day. Not to mention the spring water, even the small rivers were horribly polluted, and the stench was overwhelming. Although the government had spent a lot of money to clean up the environment, there were no results. The smog was getting heavier and heavier. The river water was also getting more and more turbid. In his entire life, this was the first time he had seen a spring that was so clear and green. Lingling walked to the side of the spring, scooped up a handful of spring water, leaned her face in, and drank a big mouthful. When Yu saw this, he imitated her and scooped up a handful of water to taste. It was indeed sweet. Isn't it very sweet? Lingling asked triumphantly. Yu nodded and drank a few more mouthfuls. Apart from the sweetness, the spring water slid down his throat. That taste was very satisfying. Chapter 1267. Let's go. It's getting late, let's go back for dinner. Yu could not help sighing inwardly. Time was passing so slowly. He wished that tomorrow would arrive sooner so that he could contact his family and return home as soon as possible. It would be great if he could grow a pair of wings. He could then fly back to his mommy's side. As he lamented, Yu and Lingling returned to the Zhao family's house. Dinner was ready. Yu glanced at the table. The dishes were simple and plain, but they were all homegrown vegetables and rice. Sometimes, he envied such a peaceful and simple life. Yu lamented again. After thanking Zhao Xianxia and Li Ru, he picked up his bowl. His eating posture was so elegant that it was truly astounding. Li Ru could not help praising, "Ah Jun, look, the children in the city are indeed different. Look at his eating posture, he's just like a young master, so elegant and polite." With that, she did not forget to admonish Lingling and Daodu. "Look at you too, you should learn more from him." Lingling stuck out her tongue indignantly and buried her head in eating. After finishing his meal, Yu put down his bowl and chopsticks and thanked them again. "Thank you, uncle and auntie, for preparing such a delicious dinner for me. I'll remember your kindness when I get home." "Hey, child, why are you being so polite?" Li Ru's heart was filled with sweetness when she heard this. Yun Tianyu was serious about this, though. His mommy had taught him since he was young that he should remember the kindness of a drop of water. When he got home, he would think of a way to repay this family handsomely. At night. There were only a few small rooms in the Zhao family's house. Usually, Daodu and Lingling slept on the same bed. Now that Yu was here, they could only suffer and squeeze together with the 3 children. Yu Yu was not used to beds. The Zhao family's bed was especially hard, so he did not sleep well. He tossed and turned in bed and only fell asleep in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, Yu Yu was half awake when he suddenly heard a commotion outside the door. Yu Yu was awakened by the noise and saw Li Ru running in with her hair disheveled. Without saying anything, she picked up one child in each hand and woke Lingling up. She lowered her voice and said, "Lingling, wake up. Come with me." Lingling had a confused look on her face. She was half awake, but she subconsciously listened to Li Ru and ran behind her. Li Ru carried Yu Yu and Daodu in each of her arms while Lingling followed behind her. She ran up the mountain with the 3 children in tow. What happened? Lingling followed behind Li Ru, panting heavily. She rubbed her sleepy eyes with one hand, obviously confused. Just now, in the middle of the night, she suddenly heard the courtyard door outside her house being kicked open. She immediately got up from the bed and rushed to the door with Zhao Xiangjuan, only to see a few men in black walking in. Their first words were, "Where's the child?" "Child?" Li Ru did not understand. "What child? Who are you? Don't play dumb. Hand over the child you saved today." They followed the trail all the way here. Just as they arrived at the village, they heard that this family had saved a child from the mountains. The child was about 7 or 8 years old and was covered in blood. They were certain that this child was the one they were looking for. Zhao Xiangjuan immediately realized that these people did not come with good intentions, so he quickly ordered Li Ru to take the child and escape from the back door, leaving him alone to deal with them. Chapter 1268. Zhao Xiangjuan immediately realized that these people were not friendly, so he hurriedly instructed his wife to run from the back door with the children, leaving him alone to hold them off. The woman, who was flustered, did as she was told. She ran to the room with her hair disheveled. Carrying Yu Yu in one hand and Daodu in the other, she woke Lingling up and ran out from the back door with the 3 children. There was a very secluded mountain path at the back door of the Zhao residence, which led up the stairs. At this time, it was dark and windy. The night wind in the mountain forest was especially strong. It whistled like a knife, stinging one's cheeks. Li Ru ran in a panic, not knowing how far she had run with the children in her arms. As a farmer's woman, she had amazing physical strength because she had been doing farm work since young. Yu Yu and Daodu were very thin, so they did not weigh much in her arms. Lingling, on the other hand, was still young. After running a few miles on the mountain path behind her, she staggered and became a little unsteady. "Ah ma! Ah ma, what's wrong? What happened?" Lingling shouted in panic as she ran behind her. Even if her heels were sore, she did not stop running. Yu Yu remained silent throughout the journey. He lay on his mother's shoulder and looked in the direction of the Zhao residence from time to time. Suddenly, an ominous premonition arose in his heart. Could it be that Mu Lianjue's men had caught up with them first? He felt vaguely uneasy. His small hands clenched tightly into fists, and his palms were wet with sweat. Li Ru led them to a secluded temple on the mountain. This temple was old and cold. It had been abandoned for a long time, and no one had taken care of it. Usually, many children would occasionally come to this temple to play. Other than that, there were few people in this area. Li Ru hid in a small house with the children. She put them down, turned around, closed the door, and locked it. Then, she looked outside through the broken window from time to time. Yu Yu looked around. Under the white moonlight outside the window, he could see the dust flying in the air. Perhaps it had been abandoned for too long, for the corners of the room were full of cobwebs. The table was crooked and had fallen to the side, missing an arm or a leg. A musty smell wafted over. The room was cold and damp. Ling Ling, who was barefooted, was shivering from the cold. She walked behind Li Ru and gently tugged at her clothes. "Ah ma! It's so dark here, I'm scared. Shoo. Don't make a sound. Li Ru reprimanded him sternly, and then looked outside the house vigilantly. Yu Yu curled up in a corner, her mind racing. He didn't know what had happened, but when he was half awake, he vaguely heard a gunshot and a fierce kick on the door. Then, Li Ru ran in with her hair disheveled. Without saying a word, she carried him and Lil P and ran to the back room. He guessed that something must have happened. Yu Yu pursed her lips and looked up at Li Ru, only to see that she was still in shock. Her chest was heaving up and down violently, and her eyes were filled with fear. He walked over and placed his little hand gently on her shoulder. This small action seemed to have given her a dose of reassurance. Only then did Li Ru's emotions ease up a little. Auntie, what happened? Chapter 1269. In an instant, all her fears collapsed. She burst into tears. I don't know, either. I really don't know what happened. Your uncle told me to bring you guys away first, so I didn't think much about it. She then gave him a rough account of the situation. Upon hearing this, Yu Yu guessed that the assassins sent by Mu Lianjue had caught up with them. Auntie, why didn't you tell me earlier? Yu Yu looked at her with a complicated gaze. Their target is me. There's no need to implicate you guys. In his heart, he felt grateful and guilty toward Zhao Xiangjuan. Those people wanted them to hand over the child, so Yu Yu was certain that they were here for him. In fact, as long as Zhao Xiangjuan handed him over, they would not be implicated. Yu Yu did not want to implicate the innocent, nor did he want to sacrifice unrelated people. Hence, he stood up and walked toward the door. Li Ru pulled him back. Where are you going? Those people are here for me. Yu Yu replied in a low voice, if I go back now, Uncle will be safe. Otherwise, I'm afraid that something will happen to him. No. It's too dangerous for you to go back. They all had guns in their hands now. It's too dangerous. Li Ru insisted on not going back. She was not cultured, but her nature was simple and honest. She was very kind. She could not watch such a young child put himself in danger. Don't worry, your uncle will be fine. He'll be fine. Li Ru kept repeating these words as if she was hypnotizing herself. She kept consoling herself. Yu Yu felt especially upset. In his heart, he only hoped that Zhao Xiangjuan would be safe and sound. Lingling and Lil P were huddled together helplessly, shivering from the cold. She had no idea what was going on, and her eyes were filled with fear. Lil P, on the other hand, was also panicking. She snuggled tightly in Lingling's arms and widened her eyes pitifully. There was only confusion and fear in her eyes. Li Ru hugged Yu Yu tightly in her arms. She felt extremely uneasy and tormented all the time. Time passed second by second, and it felt like a century. The sky gradually brightened, and it was dawn. Suddenly, shouts could be heard from the mountain. Aru, Aru. Daoist's mother? Hearing this, Li Ru was startled. However, she could vaguely tell that one of the voices belonged to her sister-in-law. She immediately opened the door. Qinfen? Li Ru called out. A series of messy footsteps ran in her direction. Soon, a group of villagers rushed into the temple. Seeing that it was Li Ru, her sister-in-law rushed over with tears streaming down her face, wailing loudly, Li Ru, hurry back and take a look. My father, my father. Hearing this, Li Ru became nervous. What happened to his father? The woman slapped her thigh with tears in her eyes. Suddenly, she saw Yun Tianyu behind Li Ru. She rushed over and pushed his shoulder. Yun Tianyu was suddenly pushed to the ground. When his back hit the ground, it affected his wound. He involuntarily sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain and opened his eyes abruptly. Lingling was shocked. She hurried forward and helped Yu Yu up. Li Ru was stunned and shouted, Qinfen, what are you doing? Why did you push this doll? Chapter 1270. What do you mean by that? She panicked. What's going on? What's wrong with my son's father? Tell me quickly. Qinfen hurriedly said, my son's dying, you'd better go back and take a look. Ah! She screamed and immediately ran in the direction of the house. Yu and Lingling looked at each other before the three children followed closely behind. She ran all the way down the mountain and rushed into the courtyard. Seeing 5 fully armed men, she was stunned at first. Her heart skipped a beat and she took a step back. However, when she calmed herself down and sized up the men standing in front of her, she realized that they were not the men in black who had broken into the house in the middle of the night. Li Ru looked around with trepidation, only to find that there were a few cold corpses lying at the feet of these people. Her eyes widened in fright and she subconsciously screamed, ah! For so many years, Anyang village had been a peaceful place with simple folk customs. Everyone was united and friendly, and no one had ever died here. Hence, this was the first time she had seen such a tragic scene. She took a closer look and saw that these corpses belonged to none other than the men in black who had broken into the house in the middle of the night with guns in their hands. The thick and pungent smell of blood assaulted her nostrils. Li Ru was frightened and took a few steps back. At the same time, she became vigilant and looked at the men in front of her warily. You, who are you? The mercenaries turned around and glanced at her before asking coldly, where's the child? She was even more alarmed when she heard that. Who are you? Yu and Lingling arrived just as she finished speaking. She anxiously stepped forward and shielded him behind her. When the mercenaries saw Yun Tianyu, the leader of the group took out a photo from his breast pocket. After carefully comparing the photo, he walked toward him. Li Ru became more alert. Qinfen stomped her feet in anger. Ah Ru, why are you still helping this scourge at this point? Hand the child over to them. No. The child is innocent, we can't hand him over to them. She insisted stubbornly. Yu furrowed his brows and glanced at the mercenaries. When he saw the Hurricane Group logo on their armbands, his brows relaxed and he slowly pushed her away. She was shocked and reached out to pull him back, but Yu placed his hand on the back of hers. Don't worry, Auntie. With that, he turned around and calmly walked toward the mercenaries. Just when everyone thought that these mercenaries would take the children away in a rough manner, the moment they saw Yun Tianyu standing in front of them, the burly men immediately got down on one knee. Director Yun. We're here to receive you. After they finished speaking, they all lowered their heads, and a respectful expression appeared on their cold faces. This scene caused everyone to be shocked. Did they hear it? These men actually addressed a 7- or 8-year-old child. In their impression, this was a name on Yun. Everyone was baffled and found it hard to digest this fact. Yu glanced at them and asked in a low voice, what exactly happened? Chapter 1271. It turned out that, as Vermilion Bird subordinates, they were sent as the vanguard to search for his whereabouts. They followed his trail all the way here, but they did not expect to be beaten to it by Mu Lianjue's assassins. By the time they arrived, Mu Lianjue's men had already shot and injured Zhao Xiangjuan. The two sides met and exchanged gunfire. Vermilion Bird's vanguard was of superior quality and killed Mu Lianjue's men in less than 10 seconds. At this time, Zhao Xiangjuan was already on the verge of death. He only had one last breath left. They observed for a while and found that the man's thigh was hit by a bullet, but it was not fatal. What was fatal was the bullet that hit his lung. They had experienced too many casualties in their lives. After checking his injury and performing emergency treatment, they found that the bullet had penetrated the man's lung artery. Generally speaking, a bullet in the lung was the cruelest. A person would suffer massive bleeding from a bullet in the lung, resulting in pneumothorax. They would fall into a coma or even go into shock due to breathing difficulties. 2 to 3 hours later, they would die from respiratory failure due to the massive bleeding in the lung. There was no hope. This place was so backward that there was no way to treat such a wound. Yu asked, "Where is he? Where is he?" "In the house." As soon as she said that, she ran into the house like a madwoman. However, just as she stepped into the house, she vaguely heard a man's heavy breathing coming from the room. Lingling followed behind her. The mother-daughter pair rushed into the room, only to be stunned when they saw Zhao Xiangyuan lying on the bed and convulsing all over. They were stunned for a few seconds. Then, she let out a sorrowful scream. Her legs went weak as she stumbled to the bedside. "Ah Jun? Ah Jun, what's wrong with you?" "Father." Lingling pounced on him as well. She held the man's face in her hands, only to see that his eyes were rolled back and blood was foaming at the corner of his mouth while his breathing was rapid. He seemed to be dying. This realization was undoubtedly the end of the world for her. She felt as if she was about to be drowned out by an overwhelming fear. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. Zhao Linghua didn't know what had happened. She didn't know why Zhao Xiangyuan was injured, but seeing him constantly coughing up blood, she knew that this was a bad sign. She was so scared that she opened her mouth and began to cry. "Father! Father, what's wrong with you? Father!" Amid Lingling's sorrowful cries, Li Ru's body swayed. She almost blacked out and fainted. She held on to the bed, still unable to calm her emotions. She did not know any medical knowledge, but looking at Zhao Xiangyuan's condition, she knew that it was over. He could not be saved. Li Ru's heart was filled with grief. She threw herself onto Zhao Xiangyuan and burst into tears. Li Ru and Zhao Xiangyuan had always been very loving. The two of them were introduced to each other by their families. Li Ru admired Zhao Xiangyuan's honesty, and Zhao Xiangyuan loved her very much. She had also imagined countless scenes of life and death, but she never thought that one day, she would lose him under such circumstances. The most painful thing in the world is the separation of life and death. Chapter 1272. Yu and Lil P rushed into the house and smelled the pungent smell of blood. He walked to the bed and saw the blood on the man's lips. He was stunned. Li Ru was on the verge of breaking down. She hugged Zhao Xiangyuan's shoulders tightly and cried. Lil P surrounded Zhao Xiangyuan and their eyes were red. Yu, who was standing at the side, could not bear it and instantly felt extremely guilty. Daoist glanced at him all of a sudden. He took a step forward, clenched his fists, and punched Yu's body. "Give me back my father. Give him back to me, give him back to me." Lil P cried and punched him. He was so weak that it was pathetic. Yu did not dodge. He was also very sad. Even he did not expect this to happen. How did this happen? Yu mumbled in confusion. "It's all your fault. It's all your fault." Lil P collapsed on the ground and wailed. He rubbed his eyes and his face was wet with tears. Li Ru and Lil P were also in tears. Red Sparrow received news that the man had been found. She immediately rushed over with her men after receiving the coordinates. It was already dawn. When Red Sparrow arrived, she saw that the Zhao family had already started to prepare for the funeral. People were coming in and out. Li Ru had to pull herself together and start to prepare for the funeral. Zhao Xiangyuan had already passed away. Yu sat at the door with a gloomy face. Red Sparrow raised her hand and gestured for her men to wait for her orders. She walked to Yu and squatted down. "President Yun, I'm sorry I'm late." Yu's eyes were gloomy as he lowered his head without saying a word. The vermilion bird was slightly startled. She could not help but reach out and gently place her hand on his shoulder. Yu suddenly raised his hand and held her hand tightly. "President Yun," Red Sparrow was stunned and looked at him in surprise. "Colonel Vermilion Bird, where have you been?" Yu gripped her fingers tightly and looked up with a cold expression. Her clear eyes showed no emotion. There was only coldness. Why can Mu Lianjue's men chase us here, but you can't? Yu's voice was cold. He looked at her angrily and reprimanded, tell me the reason. The vermilion bird was stunned. Although this child was young, the aura he exuded was extremely oppressive and domineering. She was slightly shocked. Are you really going to give your all in this operation? Yu said coldly, don't tell me, Colonel Suzaku, you're worse than those people. I'm very disappointed in you. I'm sorry, President Yun. This time, it's my fault. Vermilion Bird lowered her head in guilt. Yu said mercilessly, reflect on yourself when you get back. Red Sparrow said firmly, yes. She carefully observed his expression and asked in a low voice, President Yun, I'll bring you back now. No. Yu replied. Yu sighed. I'll go back after attending the funeral. She replied, okay. The news reached the Mu family. Mu Yaja was relieved to know that they had found Yun Tianyo's whereabouts. He heard that the child was safe and only slightly injured. He would be staying there to recuperate for a few days. Once he recovered, Vermilion Bird and the rest would escort him back. Gong Jia had sent more men, and Luca and Njia were on their way. Chapter 1273. When Mu Yaja arrived with Yun Shishir, Shao Yichen was lying on the bed. His face was pale and lifeless. The moment he woke up, he made a fuss about getting out of bed. It was only when he received news that Yu's whereabouts had been found that he felt at ease. He obediently lay back on the bed and drank some porridge. The doctor said that the wounds on his body were only superficial and did not affect his muscles or bones. It was just that the wounds were infected and were not treated in time. As a result, they became inflamed and caused a high fever. Fortunately, Shao Yichen's physical fitness was strong. After a night of rest, his fever quickly subsided. As for the reason why he fainted, it was because he had exhausted too much of his energy. He only recovered some of his vitality after taking a few bottles of nutrient fluids. The doctor could not help but marvel at this child's good physique. Yun Shishir walked into the ward and slowly walked to his bedside. She lowered her head and carefully sized up Mu Yichen's pale face. Mu Yichen heard movement and slowly opened his eyes. When he saw Yun Shishir, his cracked lips moved and two words escaped from his mouth. Mommy. His eyes instantly reddened. When the mother and son met again, it felt like a lifetime had passed. They had been apart for a few days, but it felt like a century had passed. Yichen. Yun Shishir gently hugged his shoulders with reddened eyes. She did not dare to use too much strength for fear of hurting his wounds. When she thought of how he had suffered so much because of her heart ached even more. She was so sad that tears fell from her eyes. I'm sorry. Yichen, I'm sorry. Shao Yichen tried his best to open his eyes wider. He lifted his heavy hands and hugged her shoulders. Mommy, I'm back. Yun Shishir hugged him a little tighter and choked out, Shao Yichen, Mommy missed you so much. Little Yichen's expression changed a little as his eyes reddened all of a sudden. He could not hold back the tears that he had been desperately trying to hold back, and they gushed out of his eyes. He hugged her even tighter and rested his head on her neck. He said sadly, Mommy, Shao Yichen missed you too. Mu Yaja slowly walked to the bedside and sat on his side. He wrapped his long arms around the mother and son and pulled them into his embrace. The three of them hugged each other tightly. For the first time in his life, Mu Yichen had the urge to cry. He had never felt this way before. The warmth that was injected into his heart flowed along with his blood, causing his originally cold limbs to gradually warm up. Shao Yichen suddenly raised his head and smiled at Mu Yaja. Daddy, Shao Yichen listened to me and protected Mommy and little brother well. Mu Yaja looked at the little fellow with a complicated expression. He looked at his pale face. He did not know what the two children had gone through along the way. Even Xiao Yichen, who had always been strong, was exhausted. For a moment, he had mixed feelings. Relief, pity, guilt, and self-blame, all of them welled up. Looking at Xiao Yichen's proud little face, Mu Yaja could not help but laugh. This little fellow. He did not disappoint him. At such a young age, he already had such great responsibilities. Therefore, he was not stingy with his praise. Xiao Yichen, you did well. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he could not help but smile in surprise, revealing his neat, snow-white teeth. Chapter 1274. Daddy rarely praised him. No matter what he did, he rarely received Daddy's approval and praise. This was just a few pieces, but it was undoubtedly the highest praise for him. Xiao Yichen was greatly encouraged. What do you think? Mu Yaja's eyes flashed with a smile, but his gaze was full of admiration and approval. Mu Yichen's face couldn't help but turn slightly red. To him, Mu Yaja's praise was the highest praise for him. In his heart, he felt a little bit of a sense of accomplishment because he received Mu Yaja's approval. Daddy, this is what I should be doing. Protecting mommy is also my responsibility, isn't it? He licked his dry lips and suddenly smiled as he said that. Mu Yaja couldn't help but reach out and ruffle his hair lovingly. The warmth from his palm was so real. Mu Yichen was extremely greedy for this warmth and closed his eyes contentedly. Daddy, mommy, when are we going to bring little brother home? Unspoken gently rubbed his little hand and gently coaxed, when you're better, we'll bring you home together, okay? Mu Yichen immediately said, I'm already better, there's no problem. I can get out of bed and walk around. Unspoken didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She reached out and scratched his upturned nose bridge with her finger. She rebuked, little idiot, you're so badly injured. You should rest in bed for a few more days, okay? Mommy will accompany you. Mu Yichen was a little happy. When he heard that Unspoken wanted to accompany him, his face couldn't help but turn red. He was a little shy. At the same time, it was a dreamlike surprise. Growing up, he didn't lack for anything. Basically, no matter what he wanted, he could have it all with just a word. As the future successor of the Mu family, he was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Since then, he had been doted on by everyone. Everyone in the Mu family revolved around him. Naturally, he didn't lack anything. If he had to say what he lacked, the only thing he lacked was companionship. Sometimes, he really envied children of the same age who could have so much companionship. When he first entered kindergarten, Mu Yichen had to admit how jealous he was when he saw the children running towards their parents who had been waiting outside the school for a long time and throwing themselves into their arms. Every time this happened, he would imagine when he would be able to see his daddy and mommy standing together at the school gate, patiently waiting for him. But every time, he was greeted by a cold car. What he wanted was the company of his parents. For ordinary children, the company of their parents was often very simple and easy to obtain. However, for someone of his status, this request seemed so extravagant that he could only look forward to it. In fact, every time he received those expensive gifts, he wanted to throw them on the ground and tell his daddy, "This is not what I want. What I want is for you to accompany me. Even if it's just a little bit of time every day." His biggest wish was that his daddy could spend more time with him every day, just a little bit more. Although this thought was a little greedy, it was his most sincere wish. However, it was different now. He had a mommy. Mommy would accompany him and patiently care for him by his bedside. She would peel fruits for him, cut them into small pieces and patiently feed them to him. Chapter 1275. A child's world was so simple. What they wanted was usually very simple. At the thought that his mommy would be by his side for the next few days, Mu Yichen's heart leaped with joy. He even felt that it was quite worth it to get such treatment in exchange for all his injuries. When he thought about how he had gotten injured in the past during the special training camp and how he had pulled through in the end, he really felt a little pitiful when he thought about it. Humph. Sometimes, this daddy of his was really lousy. Mommy is still the best. As he thought about this, he couldn't help but put his thoughts on his face as he snuggled up in Yunshishi's arms. At the same time, from the corner of his eye, he lightly glared at Wuxia, as if to say in disdain, "Mommy still loves me the most." After saying this, he didn't forget to stick out his tongue at Wuxia provocatively. Yunshishi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she couldn't help pinching his cheeks. This kid had only been with Yu for a short period of time, but he had also become so clever. In the past, no matter what, he would never have said such a thing. Wuxian beamed with joy and hugged Yunshishi tightly, completely ignoring Wuxia. Wuxia felt that he had been left out. This kid. Wuxia chided in his heart, but in the end, from the bottom of his eyes, there was a rare doting and playful look that was rarely seen. The most bland happiness was nothing more than this. He thought in his heart. Wuxian suddenly thought of something and his good-looking brows suddenly raised slightly. He lifted his little face and whispered into Yunshishi's ear, "Mommy, when are you going to give birth to a younger sister for me?" When these words entered Yunshishi's ears, her face immediately flushed red. She pursed her lips, obviously a little shy. Wuxian's question had really caught her off guard and she was completely unprepared. Wuxia didn't hear what Wuxian whispered into Yunshishi's ear. He only saw her face change, as if she was a little embarrassed. Yunshishi rebuked and poked Wuxian's head. She laughed and said, "What are you thinking about all day long? Mommy, are you shy?" Wuxian looked at her, black and white eyes, bright, shining with a naughty luster. Yunshishi blushed when she heard this. Wuxia glanced at him and couldn't help but ask, "What were you whispering about?" Before Wuxian could say anything, Yunshishi immediately said, "Don't tell him." Wuxia's eyes narrowed dangerously as he swept his gaze over Yunshishi and Xianxia. In reality, Wuxian had always wanted a younger sister. He had even fantasized that if he had an adorable younger sister, he would definitely dote on her to the core and give her a lot of love. He would treat her like a little princess in the palm of his hand and make her happy and blissful. Perhaps this had something to do with his personality. Xianxia had been instilled with strict teachings since he was young. This made him extraordinarily responsible at a young age. He liked to take care of the weak. He wanted a younger sister because he had seen a pair of siblings outside an ice cream shop. The older brother was very tall, about 1.8 meters tall, while the younger sister was as small as a bean, riding on the older brother's shoulder. Chapter 1276. However, it wasn't difficult for him to see her dependence on her brother. Her brother had been carefully protecting her from the start. The doting and gentle look in his eyes made the entire scene seem very loving. He was extremely envious. He really wanted to have a younger sister like her. Then, he could also dote on her, protect her, and accompany her as she grew up. This was Xianxia's ultimate dream. He thought that if he had a younger sister, he would definitely be a successful and responsible older brother. As he thought about this, the hope in his heart burned even more. He looked at Yunshishi with great expectations. It was as if he was saying, "Mommy, give birth to a younger sister. I want a younger sister." For a moment, Yunshishi felt embarrassed and helpless. She didn't know how to answer the child's question. Wuxia looked at her face and couldn't help but lean closer to her. He whispered into her ear with a devilish expression, "What did he just say?" I didn't hear him," she mumbled softly. However, she was going to play dumb until the end. Wuxia narrowed his eyes. This woman was obviously brushing him off. He couldn't help but feel displeased. When Xianxia couldn't see him, his large palm gently patted her buttocks. There was a hint of danger in his voice as he said, "Speak." Yun Shishir was so angry that she was at a loss for words. How could this man be so vile? Was he trying to take liberties with her in front of the child? Xiao Yichen didn't see Mu Yaja's little movements. However, he caught the hint of anger in Yun Shishir's eyes when she looked at Mu Yaja. He said angrily, "Daddy, you're bullying mommy again." Mu Yaja was speechless. This brat is so biased. His little love rival. Mu Yaja scolded him in his heart. It seemed that in the future, not only would he have to compete with Yu for Yun Shishir's affections, but even this kid would have to join the battle. As sons, they all sided with their mother. Right now, both sons were protecting their mother without exception. Mu Yaja could not help but feel sour in his heart. He narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but think that it would be great if he had a daughter. It was said that daughters were their father's little lovers in their previous lives. Daughters always loved to stick to their fathers. Mu Yaja was also looking forward to having a little princess. Speaking of which, the Mu family had always been patriarchal. In the Mu family, a mother's status depended on her son. Although some words were unpleasant to hear, the idea of valuing sons over daughters had never changed in the Mu family. A son was more precious than a daughter. Especially in a prestigious family like the Mu family, the status of having a son is different from those who have daughters. Putting everything else aside, Mu Sheng's third concubine had given birth to a daughter for her first 2 pregnancies. When she was pregnant with her third child, she panicked and did a checkup to find out that it was still a daughter. Gritting her teeth, she stomped her feet and aborted the child. For the 4th time, a son finally came. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Although it was ironic, this was a common phenomenon among the noble families. Take the Song family, for example. Back then, Jiang Qimeng was able to join the Song family not only because of her maternal family's influence, but also because of Jiang Yishan. After Jiang Yishan married into the Mu family, the Jiang family received a lot of favors from the Mu family, and their status in the capital rose accordingly. After Jiang Qimeng joined the Song family was dissatisfied with this daughter-in-law. Chapter 1277. In the end, Song Zhenghua married Jiang Qimeng. When Jiang Qimeng first married into the Song family, Madame Song said that she hoped that she could bear children for the family. When these words entered Jiang Qimeng's ears, she felt a little upset. She felt that she had become a fertility machine after marrying into the Song family. Before she married into the family, she heard that Madame Song was famous for favoring sons over daughters. Jiang Qimeng had carefully inquired about it. At that time, Madame Song said to her, "Sons and daughters are the same. They are all the blood of the Jiang family and are Zhenghua's flesh and blood. Even if you give birth to a daughter, I will still treat and love her as my precious darling." Jiang Qimeng successfully got pregnant after a year of marriage with Song Zhenghua. However, when the doctor told Madame Song that Jiang Qimeng was pregnant with a girl, Madame Song's expression changed immediately. Jiang Qimeng had secretly heard a conversation between Madame Song and Song Zhenghua. Madame Song secretly blamed Jiang Qimeng for not being able to bear a son and scolded her constantly. What was even more ridiculous was that Madame Song actually said at the end of this conversation, "Zhenghua, Qimeng's stomach is disappointing. If she can't bear a son for the 2nd time, you should take in another concubine. The Song family can't lose its roots. There are 3 ways to be unfilial, but having no descendants is the worst. Mom still hopes to carry a grandson." From then on, Madame Song's attitude toward Jiang Qimeng changed a little. When the child was born, it turned out that it was a boy. It turned out that there was a mistake in the paternity test. When Madame Song saw that she had given birth to a son, she was surprised and overjoyed. Even her attitude toward Jiang Qimeng changed a little. After having Song Yunxi as a son, Jiang Qimeng gave birth to Song Enya and Song Enshi one after another. In addition, Mu Yaja especially doted on Song Enya and Song Enshi, so the 2 sisters were so favored in the Song family. However, Mu Yaja did not have such old-fashioned thoughts. In his heart, he preferred daughters. When Song and she was just born, he carried her in his arms. The child was so small. Her wrinkled little face was red, and her 2 little hands were grabbing his fingers randomly. She held them in her mouth and nibbled on his fingers happily. When Song and she's eyebrows matured a little, she entered his eyes and received more love from him. Every time he held this squishy little ball in his arms, he would fantasize that he could also have a daughter like this. Small, soft, cute, beautiful, who liked to stick to him and play in his arms. Just thinking about it made him feel so happy. Unknowingly, this little princess complex is rooted in his heart. He always wanted a daughter, and sons as his thoughts. This was especially so when Yunshishi, with her son's protection, could not help lifting her chin and glancing at him smugly. In his eyes, it was obvious that she was flaunting. The idea of having a daughter became even more restless. "Was Song's," he told her. Two's families of all of this Song family. This sentence made Yunshishi's face look even more familiar. This father and son pair, she simply didn't know what to say. One of them said, "Give me a sister." The other said, "Let's have a daughter." The father and son were the same. How could they have a daughter just because they wanted one? How many people wanted to have a son but ended up with a daughter? Chapter 1278. So many people hoped for a daughter, but in the end, they gave birth to a son. Some things, the more one thought about it, the harder it was for them to come. Giving birth to a son or a daughter depended on fate. You couldn't just get what you wanted. Mu Yaja lowered his gaze and sized up Yunshishi's blushing face. He couldn't help but chuckle playfully and pecked her tender cheek. "Why? You don't want to?" Yunshishi said angrily, "Stop fooling around." When Mu Yichen saw the intimate scene between the two of them, he immediately covered his eyes shyly. However, at the same time, he didn't forget to open his fingers a little and peek through them. Mu Yaja snickered in his heart. This kid might look silly and adorable on the surface, but in reality, he could be very sly at times. The father and son looked at each other silently, their gazes secretly challenging each other. "Daddy, what were you whispering to mommy just now?" Mu Yaja snorted coldly. His sexy lips opened and closed as he said, "It's a secret." Xiao Yichen was angry. He puffed up his cheeks and glared at him angrily. Yunshishi was amused by the confrontation between the father and son. What a pair of clowns! She thought to herself, but she also found it interesting. When Mu Yichen saw Yunshishi laughing secretly, he immediately looked at her with an aggrieved expression. "Mommy, Daddy is bullying me." Yunshishi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Mommy, hug." Xiao Yichen looked like he was going to pounce into her embrace. However, Mu Yaja suddenly leaned forward and stood in between them. He took the opportunity to pull Yunshishi into his embrace. Xiao Yichen bumped into his hard back unexpectedly. He held his forehead in pain and looked up, only to see the provocation in Mu Yaja's eyes. "Yunshishi." Xiao Yichen looked resentful. "Daddy. Let go of my mommy. Mommy is mine. She's mine. It's mine. Mine." Xiao Yichen glared at him angrily. Mu Yaja was also unwilling to admit defeat. He held Yunshishi tightly in his arms, declaring his sovereignty to her. Yunshishi was completely speechless. What's going on? The father and son were actually fighting over her. Yunshishi couldn't help but feel confused. "Alright, you two, stop fooling around." Yunshishi rebuked and reached out to pinch Mu Yaja's face. "And you, bullying Xiao Yichen, huh?" Mu Yaja grabbed her hand and pecked her fingertips. His eyes were full of love. "What's wrong? Do you feel bad?" As he spoke, he leaned close to her ear and bitterly said, "Biased." She seemed to be accusing her of being biased towards her son. Unspoken was amused by the hidden bitterness in his eyes. Mu Yichen suddenly licked his dry lips and said pitifully, "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Unspoken immediately stood up. "Mommy will get you some water." "Okay." Xiao Yichen nodded cutely and smiled brightly. She walked over to the cabinet and picked up the kettle. However, she realized that there was no hot water in it. "Hence," she said, "I'll go make some water. Baby, be good and lie down. Don't get out of bed and walk around. Okay. If you want to eat fruit, Mommy will peel an apple for you when I come back." "Okay." Xiao Yichen smiled. Unspoken took the 2 kettles and left the ward. The moment the door closed, the father and son looked at each other and exchanged glances. Mu Yichen suddenly leaned against the headboard of the bed slowly. He looked like an old man. Chapter 1279. Mu Yaja. He wondered where this kid had learned to speak in such a manner. Xiao Yichen slowly added, "I have a wish that I need you to fulfill." Mu Yaja's curiosity was piqued when he heard that, so he asked, "What wish?" "Work harder. I want Mommy to give birth to a little sister for me." Xiao Yichen spoke the truth. Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. This kid had the same thoughts as him. Xiao Yichen had no idea what Mu Yaja was thinking. He casually said, "I want a little sister. Daddy, you have to work harder and fulfill my wish as soon as possible." Mu Yaja asked, "Is that what you said to Mommy?" "Uh-huh." Xiao Yichen paused for a moment before he nodded and said, "I told Mommy that I want a little sister." Mu Yaja muttered, Mu Yichen suddenly thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask, "Daddy, there's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time." Mu Yaja glanced at him quietly and asked, "What is it?" Xiao Yichen chuckled and leaned forward. He smiled and asked, "Where did I come from?" Mu Yaja was taken aback. Whether it was a child or not, they would ask this question. Why didn't he ask this question when he was young? Xiao Yichen noticed that he was silent for a long time and couldn't help but urge him. "Daddy, is this a difficult question? Tell me. Tell me, tell me." Mu Yaja glanced at him and gave him an ambiguous answer. "You came from your mommy's stomach." Xiao Yichen furrowed his brows when he heard this. He didn't quite understand. He didn't quite understand. He knew that he came from mommy's stomach. He had seen pregnant women with big bellies before. At first, when he saw those women's bellies swollen like balloons, he was a little surprised and thought that they were sick. However, the teacher replied that the reason why those women's bellies were so big was because they were pregnant with babies. Xiao Yichen couldn't help but feel amazed. Therefore, he also understood that when he was young, his mommy's belly must have swollen like those women. When she was pregnant with him, his mommy must have been very tired. A child's world was so pure and innocent, and their thirst for knowledge was so strong. Mu Yichen knew that he came from his mommy's stomach. But what he didn't understand was how he came to be in his mommy's stomach, and how he came out of her stomach. Thus, he asked the question in his heart, "Daddy, then answer me. How did I get into mommy's stomach?" Mu Yaja pondered for a moment, then threw out a typical official response. "You'll understand when you grow up." "What?" Xiao Yichen was very unhappy with this answer. He felt that it was perfunctory. Then, he straightened his back, arched his arms, and showed off the muscles on his arms. "Daddy, I've already grown up. Look." Mu Yaja was once again speechless. Tell me. How did I get in?" Xiao Yichen asked incessantly. Mu Yaja raised his brows, thought of a literary answer, and said mysteriously, "Because Daddy planted a seed in Mommy's body." Xiao Yichen widened his eyes in surprise. "A seed?" "Yes." A seed? You and your brother are that seed." "Oh." Chapter 1280. When Yun Shushu returned, she saw Xiao Yichen pestering Mu Yaja and asking relentlessly, "Daddy, Daddy, then how did you plant my brother and I into mommy's body?" Yun Shushu froze on the spot when she heard that. Her face flushed red again. She was embarrassed and annoyed as she glared at Mu Yaja angrily. She didn't know what the father and son were secretly discussing while she wasn't around. What did he mean by, planted into mommy's body? Why did these words sound so filthy and perverted the more she listened to them? The father and son clearly didn't realize that Yun Shushu had pushed open the door and walked in. They were still discussing a certain sacred topic. As Mu Yaja peeled an apple for him, he said mysteriously, "You've been injected before, so you should know what it's like." "Yes. I know." Xiao Yichen nodded his head vigorously, his face full of curiosity. Mu Yaja said in a low voice, "It went in just like that." Yun Shushu, Xiao Yichen widened his eyes in disbelief, but he still didn't quite understand. "Daddy, I don't really understand. It's a needle used for injections. Could it be that Daddy also used a needle to inject the seed?" Mu Yaja said impatiently, "Figure it out yourself." "Oh. I understand now. Daddy, is it that syringe?" Mu Yaja, Yun Shushu, she was really a little flustered. "Then, how did my brother and I come out of mommy's body?" Xiao Yichen pestered him again, once again displaying his strong curiosity. The little guy was determined to get to the bottom of this. Mu Yaja glanced at him. "Son, can you ask some questions that are beneficial to your body and mind?" "Isn't this a question that's beneficial to your body and mind?" Xiao Yichen retorted with a strange expression, leaving Mu Yaja speechless. Ahem, Yun Shushu blushed. She clenched her fists and pretended to cough, instantly attracting the father and son's attention. She felt that if she didn't interrupt at the right time, who knew what this man was going to instill in his son? Oh my God! So embarrassing. What syringe, injection, how could he answer like that? Xiao Yichen turned his head and saw Yun Shushu return to the ward with 2 bottles of hot water. He immediately said enthusiastically, "Mommy, you're back." She gave him a gentle smile. "Yes. Mommy, come back." Then, from the corner of her eye, she glared at Mu Yichen. The latter sat calmly at the side, showing no signs of repentance. Yun Shushu was even angrier when she saw this. Just as she sat down, Xiao Yichen stuck to her and asked the question that was interrupted just now. "Mommy, tell me, how did you and I come about?" Yun Shushu turned her head with a smile and pinched his tender little face. "Why are you suddenly asking this question?" "I've been thinking about this question for a long time, but I still can't figure it out. How did I come about when Daddy and Mommy got together?" Xiao Yichen looked conflicted as he furrowed his brows. It looked like he had been troubled by this question for a long time. Mu Yaja looked at Yun Shushu with a teasing and mischievous gaze. His thin lips curled up slightly with a hint of playfulness. He also wanted to see how she would answer this question. Yun Shushu couldn't help but feel a little dazed. When she was young, she had asked her mother the same question. Chapter 1281. Her mother replied, "You are the product of Mommy and Daddy's love. Mommy and Daddy loved each other, and then they had you." When she reached puberty at the age of 12 or 13, she was still clueless about the relationship between men and women. Later on, she had biology classes in school. During class, she could still remember the shyness of the students when the teacher showed them the different biological structures of men and women. It was only during biology class that he realized that her arrival wasn't as simple as the crystallization of love. Hence, Yun Shushu explained to Xiao Yichen, "Baby, have you seen a tadpole before?" Xiao Yichen nodded and said, "Yes, I have. A tadpole is small, black, and has a long tail. It's very cute. In the beginning, you were just tadpoles in Daddy's body." Xiao Yichen widened his eyes in surprise. I'm a tadpole in Daddy's body? As he spoke, his curious gaze landed on Wuxia, sizing him up from head to toe. He wished his eyes could see through the man's body as he widened them so much that they could penetrate his body. Wuxia was silent. This explanation was very good. It was very vivid. Unspoken continued to explain, after Mommy and Daddy got together, the tadpole in Daddy's body swam and swam and swam into Mommy's body. As soon as she finished speaking, Wuxia couldn't help but chuckle. Unspoken blushed and flew into a rage out of humiliation. She looked up and glared at him angrily. "May I ask if you have any objections to my explanation?" Wuxia regained his serious expression and said, "No." Unspoken covered her face in vexation. Belatedly, she also realized that her explanation was very dirty. However, in Xiao Yichen's eyes, this process was extremely profound. Although he did not fully understand what she was saying, his impression of her became more vivid and intuitive after listening to her words. Unspoken used a metaphor to explain to him how the tadpole swam into her body, grew into a baby, and was finally born. At the end of the question, Xiao Yichen was still very confused. "I more or less understand everything Mommy said." Xiao Yichen is the best. Xiao Yichen suddenly threw out a very thorny question. "The point is, am I not a little tadpole? What I don't understand is how I swam from Daddy's body to Mommy's body." Unspoken and Wuxia were stunned. It seemed that a child's thirst for knowledge could not be underestimated. From a certain point of view, it was extremely troublesome to answer a child's various questions perfectly. Even Mommy can't answer it. Xiao Yichen pursed his lips and looked a little disappointed. Unspoken blushed with shame and said, "This." Wuxia flicked his finger at his forehead and said, "You won't understand even if I explain it to you, little idiot." Xiao Yichen held his forehead in pain and looked aggrieved. He stared at Wuxia anxiously and looked very hurt. "Daddy, are you bullying me? Are you bullying me because I'm stupid?" Pfft. Unspoken almost burst out laughing. Did this child have to be so honest? He was so adorable. "Mommy, you're laughing at me too." Xiao Yichen complained, feeling wronged. Chapter 1282. Unspoken smiled and poured Xiao Yichen a glass of water before placing it on the cupboard next to his hand. Xiao Yichen took a sip the moment he received it. The moment his lips came into contact with the boiling water, he exclaimed in surprise. "It's so hot." Unspoken was shocked and quickly asked, "Are you scalded?" "Little idiot, can't you wait for the water to turn cold before drinking it?" Xiao Yichen realized that his mommy seemed to be able to call him "little idiot" so smoothly. Was he really that stupid? Yichen looked into the distance with tears in his eyes. Lasagna tears. Xiao Yichen was like a delicate flower. He blinked innocently and acted coquettishly at Unspoken. "It's scalded in my mouth. Mommy will blow on it." He seemed to have forgotten that during his survival training in the wild, when he was trapped in the snow with no food or water, he would directly grab the snow on the ground and stuff it into his mouth, let alone boiling water. However, when it came to Unspoken, he was no longer as imposing as before. Instead, he was as soft as a delicate flower bud, making people want to love him tenderly. Unspoken immediately cupped his face in her hands and gently blew on the corner of his scalded lips. "You're really scalded. Baby, does it hurt?" Unspoken's heart ached. Wuxia chillingly said, "He's not that delicate." When Xiao Yichen heard this, he felt even more wronged as he snuggled into Unspoken's arms. At the same time, he shot a provocative look at Wuxia. Wuxia was furious. This brat was clearly provoking him. Unspoken glared at him. "Why don't you try getting scalded? You only know how to make sarcastic remarks." Wuxia was speechless. That's right. Daddy only knows how to make sarcastic remarks. He doesn't care about her at all. Humph. Xiao Yichen followed behind and fanned the flames. Mu Yaja's face turned completely cold. It was as if a layer of snow had covered his face in the middle of winter, chilling one to the bone. Suddenly, a series of slow footsteps came from outside the door. Then, the door of the ward was slowly pushed open. Mu Sheng, in his hospital gown, stood at the door. The moment the door was opened, the wind from the window blew into the huge ward and brushed against his clothes. With the wind blowing, his clothes fluttered, making him look even more frail and boneless. He narrowed his eyes slightly and looked in the direction of the hospital bed. The scene of the three people joyfully and harmoniously fell into his eyes. Mu Sheng looked at Yunshishi unblinkingly. He did not dare to make a sound to disturb them. He only stood in a remote corner and watched quietly. He was content. He felt extremely guilty towards Yunshishi from the bottom of his heart. This child, because of him, must have suffered a lot of grievances and hardships. If it wasn't for her, her life would have been very ordinary and peaceful. Now, however, because of him, she had suffered so much injustice. When he thought of this, he could not forgive himself. Don't even dream of getting her forgiveness. Xiao Yichen raised his head and suddenly noticed someone standing at the door of the ward. He widened his eyes and was stunned when he saw Mu Sheng standing at the door. "Great Master," he called out subconsciously. Yunshishi was stunned. She could not help but follow his line of sight and look behind her. When she saw that it was Mu Sheng, her face turned cold in an instant. "Why are you here?" His voice was cold and distant. It was obvious that he was very resistant to his arrival. Chapter 1283. He rubbed his hands nervously and looked at her in shame. His old and haggard face could not hide the guilt he was feeling. I'm here to see the children. Is that okay?" he asked carefully. He had let go of all his arrogance and pride to appear so humble. His careful probing tone was as weak as a cicada's wing. Fear was written all over his face. He was afraid that she would heartlessly reject him. Yunshishi looked at him coldly. Her eyes flickered and she took a deep breath, but she still took a step back. "Sure." As an old man and Mu Yichen's great-grandfather, it was understandable that he wanted to come in to see the children. She had no right to stop him. Previously, her attitude towards him was all because when she saw him, she thought of the two children whose life and death were uncertain. Her heart was filled with hatred. If it wasn't for this foolish old man, perhaps the two children wouldn't have fallen into such a dangerous situation. She hated his foolishness and his blindness. She hated that because of him, her mother had passed away at a young age. She hated that because of him, she had suffered so much. However, now that she knew that the two children were safe, her hatred for him had more or less subsided. She was not a magnanimous person, but she knew very well that even though this old man had committed many mistakes and made many foolish choices in his life, he was, at the very least, Mu Yaja's grandfather and Mu Yichen's great-grandfather. However, the bond of blood was difficult to erase. Moreover, this pitiful old man had one foot in the grave. Even if she could not forgive him, she would not blame him too much, either. Seeing her consent, Mu Sheng was startled. Leaning on his cane and supported by the nurse, he slowly walked into the ward. His footsteps were heavy and slow. Perhaps his body had reached its limit, but he did not know what was supporting his weak will. He understood from the doctor that he did not have much time left and that his life was coming to an end. However, in his heart, there were still so many regrets that he could not let go of and so many knots that had yet to be untied. How could he close his eyes in peace? Therefore, when he knew that he didn't have much time left, he passed the position of the family head, which symbolized the highest authority, to Mu Yaja. He knew in his heart that he had done a lot of wrong to this grandson of his. With so much money, it would more or less make up for the mistakes he had made earlier. The nurse helped him sit down by the bed. Mu Sheng raised his head and looked at Xiao Yichen with his cloudy eyes. He did not speak, but his eyes were filled with relief. Xiao Yichen, on the other hand, had complicated feelings for Mu Sheng. His impression of the old man was that he was strict, stubborn, and even paranoid. Usually, he was serious in speech and manner, and his tone was stiff. When he looked at people, his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, extremely piercing. Somehow, he felt that the old man was difficult to get close to. Hence, ever since they were young, he and Mu Sheng were indeed a little distant. Even if Mu Sheng wanted to get close to him, he would stay far away from him. Now, however, the little guy suddenly felt that this great-grandfather of his was quite pitiful. It was an indescribable feeling, especially when he saw the old man's eyes when he looked at Yunshishi. There was hope, guilt, self-blame, regret, heartache, and annoyance. Chapter 1284. Mu Sheng's arrival caused the warm atmosphere in the ward to turn cold all of a sudden. Mu Yaja looked at him and asked calmly, "Grandpa, you're not feeling well. Why did you get out of bed?" Mu Sheng sighed. The high-spirited look on his face was gone. "I feel uncomfortable lying down all day, so I wanted to walk around. While I can still walk, I came to see the child." Yunshishi was stunned, but her face remained cold and she did not say anything. These words sounded rather pitiful to the ears. Mu Yichen did not feel good when he heard this. Children were easily soft-hearted. In their naive world, they all hoped for a peaceful family and prosperity. Although he did not like this old man's stubborn and stern look in the past, looking at him now, he found him to be rather pitiful. In fact, he did not know about the feud between Mu Sheng and Yunshishi, so he could not help but feel soft-hearted. He said softly, "Grandpa, you're not feeling well. Go back to the ward and rest." Hearing this, Mu Sheng's gloomy face was moved. His heart was filled with warmth as he said sentimentally, "Xiao Yichen, I'm here to see you. You've suffered such a serious injury. My heart aches and I want to sit and accompany you." "Grandpa, my injuries don't hurt anymore." Xiao Yichen did not seem to mind. In fact, he was very good at enduring pain. If other children had his injuries, they would have cried and wailed, but he acted as if nothing had happened to him. After all, he had trained since he was young, and his willpower was extraordinarily tenacious. This was also the reason why Mu Yaja insisted on throwing him into the military camp for training when he was young. Boys should know how to endure hardships from a young age and train their willpower. Children nowadays were all spoiled and spoiled. They were too delicate. He did not want his son to be raised into a little princess. Boys should be trained. Hearing this, Mu Sheng smiled and gently placed his wrinkled hand on the back of his son's hand. When Grandpa Mu was young, he had been in the army. He had been on the battlefield and had also trained. His hand that had held a gun before had a thick layer of calluses on it. Now that he was old, his hand was rough and coarse. It was painful to look at. Yunshishi looked at him indifferently. Her face was expressionless, and her eyes were cold. Although she felt sorry for the old man and found him to be rather pitiful, how could he not be hateful when he was pitiful? There was a saying that went like this: a pitiful person must have a hateful side. It made sense. When this old man was young, he was also a person who could summon the wind and summon the rain. With such a prominent position, he could cover the sky with one hand. Just now, in ancient times, he was also a figure of a generation of warlords, generals, ministers, and even the monarch of a country. When he was young, he was swift and decisive, but when he got older, he became muddle-headed and made some mistakes. Her impression of him was all from her mother. Selfish, foolish, and cruel executioner. Other than that, there was no direct impression. However, although he wasn't the main cause of his mother's death and his brother's separation, he was a part of the reason. Hence, it was difficult for her to let go and forgive him. The pain of losing a loved one was still deeply ingrained in her heart. Although this wound had scabbed over with the passage of time, it was still unbearably painful when touched. An unintentional mistake was still a mistake.